Morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're going to get started with our council session. We will begin this morning with a proclamation recognizing Gun Violence Awareness Day by Council Vice President Sidney Katz.
Well, good morning, everyone, and thank you for being here. If I could please invite everyone, and it's kind of obvious who might be standing up here with me, to please join me in the front, please. And what I'm going to do is ask everyone to please tell us who you are, and you can just hand the mic down as you go.
Amy Rhodes.
Jenny Cohen.
Vanessa Sofer.
Amy Yontef McGrath.
Lauren Klein.
Mindy Landau.
Jennifer Stein.
Lisa Fuller.
Lisa Gaddy.
Emily Kirby. Allison Rodner.
Marjorie Shanoff.
Jan McNamara, my brother-in-law John McNamara, was one of the Capitol Gazette victims. He grew up in Bethesda and lived in Silver Spring.
Kathy Sertner.
Elaine Arndt.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry for your loss. Now I think it should be noted that they have a sign that says, "Wear orange." I'm the only one who is. I think that should be noted. But the annual call to action is in its 5th year. Its purpose is to work to get closer to a future free from gun violence. National statistics show that 88 people are killed in the United States by gun violence every day. Members of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America are here today, wearing red, some wearing orange, to affirm the right of everyone to live a life free of gun violence. And because of that, we have a proclamation from the County Council. Whereas every day 100 Americans are killed by gun violence and are 25 times more likely to be killed with guns than people in other high-income developed countries, on average there are nearly 13,000 gun homicides every year. And whereas June 2nd, 2019, would have been the 22nd birthday of Hadiah Pendleton, a teenager who marched in President Obama's second inaugural parade and was tragically shot and killed just weeks later. And whereas to help honor Hadiah and the 100 Americans whose lives are cut short and the countless survivors who are injured by shootings every day, a national coalition of organizations has designated June 7, 2019, as the first Friday in June as the 5th National Gun Violence Awareness Day. Whereas the idea was inspired by a group of Hadiah's friends who asked their classmates to commemorate her life by wearing orange, they chose this color because hunters wear orange to announce themselves to other hunters when out in the woods, and that orange is a color that symbolizes the value of human life. And whereas by wearing orange on June 7, 2019, Americans will raise awareness about gun violence and honor the lives of gun violence victims and survivors. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby proclaims June 7, 2019, as National Gun Violence Awareness Day, and encourages all residents to support their local communities' efforts to prevent the tragic effects of gun violence and to honor and value human lives. And it's signed today by the Council President, Nancy Navarro, and by me. And I would like, if anybody would like to say a few words, please.
Thank you. Members of the County Council, thank you for issuing this proclamation. I'm Jennifer Stein, local group leader for the Montgomery County Local Group of Moms Demand Action for Gun Sense in America's Maryland chapter. On behalf of our group, I'm pleased and grateful that you have taken this step. Thank you for having gun sense and joining mayors, city and town councils, and school boards across the country in recognizing Wear Orange Day and weekend. The night of June 7th, buildings across the country and right here in Montgomery County will light up orange to raise awareness for gun violence victims and survivors. I also want to inform the council that for the first time on Saturday, June 8th, the Montgomery County Local Group of Moms Demand Action will be holding a rally and unity walk in downtown Silver Spring to disarm hate. Far too many of the daily gun deaths in this country involve hatred of others. Every day, 28 lives are lost to hate crimes committed with a gun against people of color, Jews, Muslims, the LGBTQ community, and immigrants. I am proud that Montgomery County is a diverse and welcoming county that stands with our neighbors in fighting against hate. On June 8th, our local group will be centering survivors of gun violence and hate crimes and communities disproportionately impacted by hate-driven gun violence. We warmly welcome Montgomery County Council members and all in attendance to attend the rally and walk in love and solidarity with Moms Demand Action and our neighbors. Hate can have no home here in Montgomery County, and we simply must disarm hate. I'll just close by saying that yesterday was Mother's Day. Moms Demand Action was founded the day after the Sandy Hook Elementary School shooting by a mother who, together with mothers like myself and the people behind me, could no longer accept the status quo in this country. Our children are our most precious resource, and we must prioritize their safety ahead of any inanimate object. That is why we keep fighting this fight against gun violence and for common sense gun law reforms. And that is why, eventually, with the help of elected officials like you, we will win. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, and thank you for all that you do. I'd like to ask my colleagues to either stand behind or come on down or whatever so that we can have a picture.
Very important issue. Thank you so much for such amazing activism. We need to continue to work hard on this very, really extraordinarily awful issue in our nation. Next, we have a proclamation recognizing National Mental Health Awareness Month by Councilmember Albornoz.
All right. Well, good morning, everybody. It is a pleasure to be with all of you this morning. Mental health is obviously a critical issue facing our nation, but especially our community. This is an issue that impacts everybody of all socioeconomic status across the entire county, and we have seen an alarming rate of issues across our entire county. I would like to invite representatives from Everymine and Cornerstone and their boards and the other incredible organizations who are here to receive this proclamation and acknowledge their incredibly important work in our community. We're also joined by Dr. Raymond Crowell, who is the chief of our behavioral health services within our incredible Department of Health and Human Services. We are seeing an alarming increase in mental health issues across the board. And I think you can draw a straight line to the proclamation we just gave earlier today. We're seeing the ramifications of mental health issues and of a lack of infrastructure and organizations that are doing the best that they can with the precious resources that they have, but that are being overwhelmed every day across the entire board. We are seeing more instances of children trying to access services and engaging in trying to get support throughout our entire community. And we as a county and as a community need to come together to step forward to provide the types of services that organizations like Every Mind and Cornerstone offer within Montgomery County, and that our remarkable Department of Health and Human Services. We're also joined by our representatives from Montgomery County Public Schools and Dr. Bryce here as well, because there have been an alarming rate of increase among suicides impacting our students across the board. So this is a critically important issue and an opportunity for us to acknowledge the great work that's happening, but the great work that needs to be done to fully address this issue. I'm joined by my colleague, Councilmember Jawando, and all of my colleagues on the council have expressed tremendous support and real leadership in wanting to address this issue moving forward. And so, Councilmember Jawando, if you wanted to say a couple of words, you're more than welcome to.
Thank you, Councilmember Albernaz, and thank you all for joining. I just wanted to say that this issue of mental health, I'm glad we're doing this proclamation. I'm glad we did both of these together, actually. As Councilmember Albernaz said, they're obviously very connected issues. We've heard time and time again from our young people, from those interacting with the criminal justice system, all across the board, age, race, that mental health is a huge issue in our community, and we're not doing enough to address it. So we're going to make strides in this budget with my colleagues, as Councilmember Albernaz mentioned, to improve and expand mental health services and access. But there's more work to do, a lot more work to do, and we're going to need to make more than just incremental progress. And I know Councilmember Albernaz and I, he's on HHS, I'm on education. We're going to be working together along with others on the council to make sure we expand access to these services to all parts of our population. So I just want to thank the community for being here, and thank you, Councilmember Albernaz, for sharing the mic for a second.
So I'd like to invite Dr. Raymond Crowell to say a few words regarding the incredible work that's happening here in the county and also what we're seeing in our community.
Thank you, Councilmember Albernaz, and thank you for the council for taking the time to do this proclamation and call awareness to this issue of mental health, not just across the country, but right here in Montgomery County. We have, there's a saying that there is no health without mental health, and that mental health is everybody's business because it's far too important to be left just to the professionals. Sorry to the professionals for that, but I think that, but it sends a point that the people here represent members of the community, members of the profession, of course, but members from the educational system, citizens, concerned citizens and advocates who are interested in promoting the health and well-being of our country, of our county. I think if we don't do something collectively to do this, we have to do something collectively. We have to be strategic about it. We have to align our efforts and coordinate them in a direction that makes sense for the best outcomes for the county. We're about the business not of preventing mental illness, but of promoting wellness first. If we do our work to promote wellness and healthy development, there will be fewer folks on the back end with a mental illness. We want to try to prevent suicides. We're trying to prevent overdose deaths. And I'm happy to say in this moment that as of last week, the number of overdose deaths in Montgomery County had dropped by 30%. So that isn't just a function of what we're doing in behavioral health, but it is a function of everything that is happening in the community. People understanding what they need to do, taking action to help each other and support each other. Without that support, this doesn't change. So we need your continued support and help in that endeavor, in our endeavors. So thank you all for being here. Thank you for this proclamation.
All right, so let's go ahead without further ado, read that proclamation. The County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby gives the following proclamation. Whereas the month of May is recognized as National Mental Health Awareness Month, which highlights that 1 in 5 adults in the United States experience a mental health condition in a given year, or 46.6 million people per year. And whereas in Montgomery County, our goal is that every resident has the appropriate prevention information and equitable access to effective treatment for behavioral health wellness. And whereas we continue to focus our efforts on reducing the tragic and troubling trend of deaths from drug overdose and suicide. And whereas we utilize interventions that are evidence-based, collaborative with consumers and families, and incorporate strength, resilience, and hope. And whereas we reflect the strategic alignment of compassionate providers, peer recovery specialists, policymakers, and advocates, and whereas we exemplify a knowledgeable, informed, supportive, and welcoming community as we continue to save lives by combating stigma and taking action to ensure the mental health of all. Now, therefore, it be resolved that the County Council of Montgomery County, Maryland, hereby proclaims May 2019 as National Mental Health Awareness Month. And in Montgomery County, we call upon our residents, government agencies, public and private institutions, businesses, and schools to increase their awareness and understanding of mental health and the steps our citizens can take to protect their mental health, accessing our comprehensive behavioral health services for all county residents. It's presented on this 13th day of May in the year 2019, and it's signed by myself and Council President, Council Member Navarro. Thank you. And if we could introduce representatives from Every Mind and Cornerstone, if you could say a couple words each as well.
A little shorter. Thank you. I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you to Councilmember Albornoz and also Councilmember Jawando and all the council members seated behind me. All of the council members are extremely supportive of our work, Cornerstone Montgomery work, MCPS, as well as behavioral health. And we appreciate that and hope that that continues. And thank you all for being here, and thank you for your continued support, and thank you to the full council.
Great.
Good morning. I'm Carrie Cho, Cornerstone Montgomery's president and CEO, and I also want to just say thank you to everyone who's here today, to the entire council, including Councilmember Albornoz and Jawando, and just for the support that we have. This is such an important issue. We've had many things that have come up, whether it's the opioid crisis, teenage suicide. Funding is a necessity, and I know money is not finite, is not infinite. Unfortunately, it is finite. But working together, I think the collaborations that we have, the partnerships that we have with agencies like Every Mind, with the Montgomery County Public School System, and certainly with the County Council are just key to making sure that we take care of the people in this community. So again, thank you so much.
Thank you both. Let's go ahead and take the picture together, if we can get tighter, and if my colleagues could stand behind us, that would be great.
Thank you so much for everything that you do. Now we have announcements. Ms. Limarzi, are there any changes?
Yes, good morning. There is an addendum this morning. Added to the council's agenda is the introduction of a resolution to approve WSSC system development charges, as well as a work session this morning on compensation for non-represented county employees.
Thank you. So in relationship to that resolution, in order to introduce it, I need a motion.
So move.
Moved by Council Vice President Katz. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Rice. This is to introduce a resolution to approve WSSC system development charge, and action is tentatively scheduled for May 15th. All those in favor of that introduction, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you. So it's been introduced. All right, so now we're on to item 1. This is action on the following negotiated collective bargaining agreement, resolution to amend Resolution 19-87, indicating council's intent regarding provisions of the collective bargaining agreement with the Municipal and County Government Employees Organization, MACGEO, Local 1994. I actually, well, turn it over to Councilmember Rice. Oh, your light was on? Okay, first let me just go ahead and ask for a motion. Would anybody like to move? Go ahead, Councilmember Rice.
Thank you, Madam President. I'd like to move that we accept the county executive's revised proposal, and I'll just list for my members what that entails. It entails a 2.25 GWA to start in December, 1% deferred increment, 3.5% service increment, and $1,000 one-time stipend, in addition to the other smaller pieces that are still included in the negotiated agreement. But those are the highlighted ones where the council had expressed concern over the previous decision that was sent over. So that would be my motion.
Okay, so it's been moved by Councilmember Rice and seconded by Councilmember Jawando. Anything else that we need to consider? Mr. Drummer, is that pretty straightforward?
The only other thing you need to consider is there is part of the agreement that talks about years 2 and 3 on the deferred step. And it should be clear that the council is not approving that because it's not part of this year's budget. And the resolution so states that you're not approving it. It would have a future fiscal impact, and so it is something that's the council subject to council review, but it's not something you actually have to. You don't have to approve it because it's not part of the FY20 budget. So if you see the resolution specifically, it's on circle, well, it's at the end of the packet. I don't think we got around to circle numbering that. Once again, the council is rejecting the group insurance benefits that we talked about last week. That's the same for every union, and is simply not approving the 1.25% FY11 service increment payable in July of 2020, which is actually FY21, and the 1.25% service increment payable in July of 2021, which is actually FY22.
Right, so what we are taking up right now is this fiscal year 20 decision. We understand that in the conversations that went on, that there were references made to, basically phasing in, if you will, the service increment. I think that we understand that, and I think that what we want to do as a council, at least is what I have heard my colleagues express, is that we would want to work to find a target that everybody can try to adhere to, and within that target, if there are decisions made by the different employee associations to include these kinds of elements, then that would be fine. I don't think that, we want to dictate exactly how it is that's going to occur. What I have heard from all my colleagues, and I think what was indicated by our vote, is that we want to make sure that before the negotiations even start, that we can agree on a general target. And this has a lot to do with many of the issues that we have discussed in the past with our fiscal health and a fiscal position. And so just want to make sure that it is clear that within the renegotiation that occurred, there was that decision made. And I think that it's important to, at least for me, on behalf of the council, to express my appreciation for the willingness to go back and take a look and reposition this particular negotiated agreement. And thank you, Councilmember Rice, for representing us. But again, this should be the decision of the executive and the employee organizations as they move forward, however they would like to address those elements. Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And I wanted to make sure that I got the motion out of the way before just expressing my thanks to both Director Madaleno and to Mr. Wren for going back to the table and working together, collaboratively understanding what our goal was that we were trying to achieve. I certainly feel as though we found ourselves with a much more sustainable path moving forward. It's one in which I appreciate the collaborative nature and continuing to work together. We are going to have to do this again. And so, it's important that we continue to have the collaborative relationship, understanding that there will be challenges that we will face when it comes to affordability on so many fronts, not just facing McGeo, but with all of our partner unions. And so from that perspective, I just wanted to express my thanks and express my thanks to you, Madam President, as well as to my colleagues for allowing me to represent us. I do feel that this negotiated compromise is one that is fair and equitable based on the circumstances that we find ourselves in. We always wish that we can do more. And certainly when time comes when we have a much more robust economy where we don't have as many challenges, we certainly look forward to continuing to work to make that happen. So thank you, Madam President.
Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you very much. Appreciate all the work that has gone into this today. And I do want to say that I am hopeful about the various measures that have been recommended as companion exercises to this discussion. I think we've highlighted a number of important steps that the county does need to take to highlight the growth of revenues, the growth of compensation, the position complement, all of these more difficult ways that we can address budget sustainability. I'm not going to be able to support this package today because I am concerned that compensation overall is growing faster than revenues. I would support a raise for our county employees. I certainly believe that our county employees do deserve a raise, but I don't think that this one meets the goals that I was hoping we would achieve. Having said that, if we are able through ongoing work to put the budget into a more sustainable path, then I really do agree that employees should share in the benefit of that. And if we are able to generate new revenues then from economic development, then again, I think that that should be shared. But right now, I think we're in a tough spot, and I think that we ought to be cautious about the future. Thanks.
Councilmember Joando.
I just wanted to express my appreciation to the administration, to the county executive, to Director Madaleno, and to Gino and your team for going back and in good faith coming back with a negotiated agreement that does make significant changes from what was before us a couple weeks ago, and cuts in every area, the GWA, and looks at the steps over multiple years. I do want to say, as far as this council member, it is my intention that that step would be fully restored over the next few years. Obviously, we deal with what the executive brings over to us. I do think that's something we need to move past and make good on and get that over with, and so we can work together in the future for the sustainability of the county. I want to thank our workers. I will be supporting the agreement and look forward to working with you all in future years to make sure that we can make sure to keep the services we need for the county and make sure you're compensated. So thank you.
Thank you. Councilmember Feetson.
Thank you for that, and I appreciate the fact that this proposal represents an improvement from what was before us previously. but it still doesn't get to where we need to be based on the extensive analysis by staff indicating what would be fiscally sustainable moving forward. While I appreciate the work that has gone into this improved agreement, I simply cannot support something that does not fully achieve the target set by the motion that I supported 2 weeks ago. While there may not be universal consensus on this particular vote here today, I believe we all on this day share a commitment to needed changes so we can achieve a more sustainable and fiscally responsible budget process moving forward, and I look forward to working together with my colleagues for that work. Thank you.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you, Madam President. The first piece of legislation I propose that the Council unanimously passed last week is the Montgomery County Pay Equity Act, which prohibits the county from asking future employees to provide their pay stubs and pay history. And this legislation was strongly supported by UFCW Local 1994. And ensuring that our workers are properly compensated is a principle that dates back to the Industrial Revolution, the Progressive Era, and is a founding hallmark of the labor movement. And these are the reasons why we have to ensure that a fair day's work results in fair day's pay. And here we are today, and over the last few weeks, trying to determine what equates to a fair day's pay. This year, this upcoming year, state employees are going to see an average of approximately 3% in their salary. For federal employees in the surrounding area, they'll receive approximately 3.77%. And members of the Montgomery County nonprofit community are simply asking us this year to increase their contracts by 3% for a cost of living adjustment. And it's clear that county employees, from nurses and social workers to firefighters and police officers, are well represented, and I applaud your leadership for sticking up for you and for doing what's right for the county's workforce. And the discussion that continues today is about parity, and it's about ensuring that our county is on a fiscally sustainable path, because the last thing we want to do is to approve contracts that we cannot afford down the road. That would be demoralizing to our workforce, and that would be problematic to our residents. Montgomery County residents depend on you every single day. From helping at our libraries to driving our buses, our quality of life is measured by your successes. Your hard work makes this happen. And moving forward, I know that there are systemic issues that we all need to work on together. And my hope is that we continue an open and honest dialogue about how best to get there. We've had an open and honest dialogue for the last number of weeks. I've been on this council for almost 5 months now. I look forward to continuing that open and honest dialogue. I will be supporting this contract, and I look forward to working with you to make the system better moving forward.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. I will also be supporting this compromise, and I do want to just talk a little bit about, I've seen firsthand the sacrifices that our employees have made, particularly over the last 12 years as the county as a whole has dealt with the Great Recession. But I also saw firsthand the difficult decisions that were made prior to that recession that exasperated the county's fiscal crisis. And so I do believe that this amended contract strikes a reasonable balance, but that moving forward, we have to continue to ensure that we provide our frontline employees with the staff and the support and the resources that they need to be able to do their jobs effectively, and that there's a personnel complement that acknowledges the growing needs that exist across the entire county. And so I look forward to working in partnership and collaboration, both in the near and long term, to address those many needs, but also bearing in mind that until we do see such time that we're able to grow our economy in a way that's sustainable, we're going to be here every year with fiscal challenges moving forward. And so we will need to collaborate effectively, and I do appreciate everyone's efforts as we've addressed this challenging and emotional issue on a lot of different levels. But I think we're in a better place than we were before, and I look forward to getting to an even better place moving forward. Thanks.
Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I, too, am going to support the renegotiated agreement. But I want to very publicly thank Councilmember Rice and Mr. Wren for all their hard work on this. I know this was not easy. And I know that we have much work to do. We do have fiscal problems in Montgomery County. And I know that we're trying to get our economic development in a better place, and we're working on that with the county executive. I know that for the individual people that I've spoken to, from employees, some of whom I've known for many, many years, they too want to collaborate with us to get us to a better place. We should not go through this each and every year. We absolutely should not. We need to have a better system. We need to have a system that doesn't necessarily say, well, you've taken it from us because the county executive negotiated it. The system really does not allow for the county council to have a dialogue before that happens. And we should not make anybody who's doing the hard work of Montgomery County each and every day think that they have gotten something, what at that point they have gotten a promise, but they haven't gotten the council's involvement in it. We need to have the council's involvement much earlier. We need to make certain that the system allows that everybody, the unions, the council, the county executive, that everybody works together to get us to a place where we don't have this kind of discussion and disagreement. So I am supporting the renegotiated agreement. I believe that even though I know that we're not we cannot vote on the steps outside of this fiscal year, I am publicly saying that I believe that certainly is a promise, and I'm somebody that certainly tries my best to keep my promises. So thank you for everyone who does all the hard work for Montgomery County each and every day.
Well, so I don't see any other lights. Let me just say that, as council president, obviously it's part of my job to lead this process of the budget. And from the get-go, I was a bit bothered that the executive chose to negotiate this particular contract in the way that he did, because we were all so worried about the fiscal issues. Nonetheless, I think that this strikes a fair balance, and I do also think that as we move forward with the subsequent years, if these pieces with regards to the additional steps or makeup steps are included and they are within that range, I will support that as well. I think that it is a little bit disingenuous not to support this particular renegotiation while there are so many items that have been added to the reconciliation list. So the bottom line is that our workers are the ones who are day in and day out providing the services that we here have to grapple with on a daily basis. It is a tough go here in Montgomery County. So in terms of the cost of living. So this is not, this is my last term, so I can say this. I don't think that we should be trying to position ourselves politically when it comes to these kinds of issues. We should be looking at what it means to be fiscally sustainable. That's what we should be doing. So this particular renegotiation, in my opinion, has parity with the other ones, and I think it's something that we can definitely afford while we work on all of those other elements that also are producing and are weighing on our budgets year after year. So I look forward to making sure that everybody steps up and does that as well. But I think that this in particular is a very fair and affordable renegotiated component, and it would position us in a, I think, quite positive, direction. So again, thank you, Councilmember Rice. Thank you, Mr. Wren. Thank you, Mr. Madaleno, for going back and taking a peek. I also want to thank our staff, who has done a lot of analysis and a lot of adding and, scenarios and things of that nature. Really do appreciate that work. So with that, all those in favor of this renegotiated contract, please raise your hand. That would be Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Vice President Katz, Councilmember Glass, Councilmember Jawando, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Navarro. Opposed? Councilmember Reamer and Councilmember Friedson. That passes 7-2. Thank you. Item 1.5 is the FY20 operating budget compensation for non-represented county employees. Final action, of course, will be part of the final budget resolution next week. This is a straw vote. So, Mr. Drummer, what do we do here? Your name is, you have a motion. Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'd like to put forward a motion that a revised GWA for our non-represented employees of 2.25% beginning in December, the same as McGeo as in the revised agreement, be moved forward.
Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Council Vice President Katz. Okay.
This is for the non-represented to be
Correct.
on the same.
1.5. Councilmember Reamer.
I do support this. I just want to say I think there's an important principle here that non-represented employees in our OHR, in our county attorney, they should be on whatever it is that is negotiated. So I do think we need to keep that in mind, and I will be supporting this motion.
Councilmember Feetson.
Yes, I agree. I am going to support this. I do believe that there should be equity between non-representative and representative. Appreciate the fact that this accomplishes that. I do, though, think that I'd be remiss if I didn't express my concerns with the ongoing situation where we start GWAs in mid-year and push that along to have current year budget savings, but ongoing sustainability challenges. That's something that I'm extremely uncomfortable with. That's something that is perpetuated by this decision. My viewpoint that there should be equity between non-representative and representative, it supersedes that. But if we are going to have these ongoing conversations about long-term sustainability, I think that we do need to look at having July 1st be the start of GWAs and having that be an expectation moving forward so that we're not baking in to future budgets a larger increase and basically glossing over the fact that it has near-term budget savings. I don't think that's in the best interest of employees who should be able to know when they should expect to get their raise, and I don't think it's certainly in the best interest of our budget process. So I'm hopeful as part of the ongoing discussions that we have that be a key component of those conversations.
All right, so all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you. Okay, so now thank you so much, Mr. Madaleno, appreciate it. Now we're on to item 2, and this is our work session on the FY20 operating budget and FY19-24 CIP amendments. This is just a continuation, and we will be, making straw votes here, obviously, because the final decision will be next week, I believe. So now we're on to item 2, and that is Health and Human Services. And I'm going to turn it over to Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. I want to begin by thanking my colleagues on the committee. This was my first rodeo, and you guys made it painless, and so very much enjoyed our collaboration and conversations through this process. I also want to thank Ms. McMillan, Ms. Yao, who were tremendous supports and provided really important and context and background, and were just tremendous assets all the way through. And I do want to begin by acknowledging Ms. Buckland, and I want to thank you for your service as the Acting Director of Health and Human Services. You've dealt with some pretty significant challenges, which included a mid-year savings plan, as well as the government shutdown, a record number of vacancies currently in the Department of Health and Human Services. But through all of that, you not only made sure that we continued our strong record of having well-established safety net in the county, but that also the trains continue to leave on time. So, Ms. Buckland, thank you for that service. So, I think the headline in the various conversations we had within the Health and Human Services Committee is that our safety net remains strong, but it is being challenged, and it is being challenged every day because of the increasing poverty we're seeing in the county, the increasing demographic shifts we're seeing in the county. We're seeing a record number of caseloads across the board in behavioral health and numerous challenges with regards to housing, and just underscores that our tax revenue is not keeping pace with the demand that we're seeing out in our communities. And so thanks to the incredible dedication of our staff in the Department of Health and Human Services and our partnerships in the nonprofit sector, we're able to do a great job, but certainly more needs to be done. So I will go through the overview and not get into every single detail of the very extensive packet before you, but we'll focus on the first few pages, which all started with a 3-0 operating budget vote. The first item that we discussed in the packet is a reduced of the increase to the electronic integrated case management system. And there is a structural deficit with regards to this issue, and we did accept the reduction as proposed by the county executive. Next, we added 2 increments of $451,410 and 2 increments of $225,000 and $700 each to the reconciliation to fund a 3% increase for eligible nonprofit contracts providing health and human services. As Councilmember Glass mentioned in his opening comments when discussing our last items, our nonprofit sector are important partners in the delivery of services across the entire county, and many of them absorb administrative expenses to be able to carry out those programs in an unsustainable fashion. And so we did propose adding an across-the-board increase. We also proposed the addition of $80,000 to the reconciliation list for an additional program manager to help with central contract managements. As my colleagues probably know, the Department of Health and Human Services manages more contracts than any other department within the executive branch combined. And it's not just ensuring that people are paid on time, but it's also ensuring that the service delivery is meeting the standard within the contract that we expect. And we are constantly being overwhelmed. And so we did request that an additional staff person be placed in that important department within the department. We do not have to place the $158,000 on the reconciliation list for the adjustment to the African American Health Program because the county executive, to his credit, did see fit to propose an amendment to the budget, which we greatly appreciate. And thank you, Mr. Waters, for your work on that, as well as the entire executive branch and OMB. We did add $39,000 to the reconciliation list to provide a 3% increase to the African American Health Program. The final amount to be consistent with the amount of the other nonprofit contracts. And we did, thanks to Councilmember Rice, and I do want to acknowledge there is a reason why Councilmember Rice is the most sought-after auctioneer in Montgomery County. He is extraordinarily persuasive, and we are fortunate to have him on the committee, and he advocated passionately for some additional funds for our minority health initiatives, which are doing really remarkable grassroots work in our communities. We also voted 3-0 to add $22,120 to the reconciliation list to replace the reduction that had been proposed to the Volunteer Tax Assistance Program, VITA. I had the opportunity to visit that program firsthand right during tax season and saw how incredibly important that work is and the relief that it provided to the families that were participating. And putting back these funds would allow that work to carry out in the entire county as opposed to just one part of the county, and we're seeing increased tax needs. Also added to the reconciliation list, but no longer necessary within the reconciliation list, is the addition of $170,000 to expand legal services for our low-income residents who are in immigration proceedings. As we all know, just by looking at the news every day, we are experiencing another wave of families who are desperately seeking asylum in our country and who, thank goodness, are choosing our community as their home because we continue the long tradition in Montgomery County and, frankly, our country of providing those support services for those families. And this would expand the great work done by the previous council to provide funds as people are going through deportation proceedings. And I do want to thank the county executive greatly here for stepping forward and placing those funds, moving those funds forward, and look forward to the partnership there. We did also add $1.8 million and change to the reconciliation list to replace the funding that had been taken away through the DD supplement. This, as you all know, generated more correspondence than just about every issue that we faced during this budget season. passionate arguments made by our really important providers who acknowledge that this supplement doesn't just provide a supplement, but frankly, it's the cost of doing business these days. And I do want to acknowledge the great work, again, of the previous council to try and make whole the organizations who are disproportionately impacted by the raise in minimum wage in the county. And also acknowledge that the majority of providers did comply with the regulations and the parameters put forward by the previous council, but there was some confusion among some in that sector, and the resolution was that we would not only place the $1.8 million on the reconciliation list, but we would also develop a work group to acknowledge the challenges that these very important providers are seeing today and the growing need in our community. And we did defer the placement of the additional $1.3 million on top of the 1.8 until that work group meets, so that we can be in a better position to work with our colleagues and make recommendations. We did also add $58,000 to the reconciliation list to fund a program specialist and a program manager in the DHHS Coordination of Community Services. This would serve people with developmental disabilities. I'll just say one last thing here on this issue. There's a stark increase in the amount of adults with disabilities that we're seeing, and there's a great infrastructure for those students that are under the age of 21, but there's a cliff, and there is undoubtedly, and not just as part of this work group, this council moving forward and the county executive are going to have to holistically look at addressing this issue because it's really impacting families emotionally and economically and financially. And it is something that we're going to have to really tackle in a very holistic way. Next, we added $69,000 to the reconciliation list for respite services to, again, support families in a similar situation. We supported the new senior home sharing pilot program but to reduce the budget by $87,000 to reflect that the program is not expected to start until the second half of FY20. Let the record hold, we did support a reduction. So we did also add 2 increments of $100,000 each to restore the reduction to the Residential Rehabilitation Supplement Program. This provides organizations with help that serve people with behavioral health needs, and appropriate that we're discussing that in Behavioral Health Awareness Month and Mental Health Awareness Month. And that would close a gap that exists with state funding. I do want to also mention briefly that we had numerous conversations with our colleagues in the state legislature this year regarding DDA, and I really have to acknowledge their leadership and partnership. There's great interest in addressing some of the needs that cross over to the state level moving forward, and this summer and the upcoming year we will have work sessions to see how we can work more effectively with our state delegation on issues that cross over from both the state to the county. We added $59,000 to the reconciliation list to begin to increase the rates to private medical professionals that serve children in the Care for Kids program. Care for Kids program is a model across the country, and but does need support because of the tremendous growing demand and increase that we're seeing for those services. We did have a work session recently in which we heard from our providers and our colleagues in the field that we are experiencing another significant wave of families that are coming across the border seeking assistance and support, and that will have an impact on our services, and in particular Montgomery Cares. We added $40,000 and $30,000 to the reconciliation list for the Care for Kids Quality Framework effort. Montgomery Cares has a long-standing clinical performance measures which have allowed robust discussion of how to improve patient outcomes. We also added $100,000 to the reconciliation list to fund medical and special dental services, which in particular our dental services is a critical need across the board and really an indicator of other health issues within a family. And so we did vote to add that to the reconciliation list. We also added $161,400 for an additional 2,000 primary care encounters for the Montgomery Cares program that serves low-income and uninsured adults. And we added 4 increments of $77,975 to the reconciliation list to allow up to a $4 increase in the primary care encounter rates paid by Montgomery Care Clinics. And a $4 increase would bring those rates to $78.40. We added 100,000, 130,000 increments in the reconciliation list to provide adult immunizations for Montgomery Care patients. The immunization issue is very much in the news, as my colleagues know, and the rhetoric is not doing our providers or our community any favors. And so to the degree to which we can add support for immunizations would benefit our entire county as a whole. We also added 55 and 70,000 to increase specialty care funding for Montgomery Care's patients, and we added 62,800 to change the income eligibility for maternity partnerships program to 250% of the federal poverty level, which is consistent with Montgomery Cares and Care for Kids. Currently, the income limit is 185% of the federal poverty level, so that would help fill that gap. We then added $329,679 to the reconciliation list to restore HRAP, which stands for the Handicap Rental Assistance Program. And there will be a follow-up discussion within FY20 regarding this initiative as a whole, and connects to some of the very important work to end homelessness, which I want to credit my colleague, Councilmember Glass, for stepping up and being our lead on this issue, and look forward to that conversation within the upcoming year. And then we added $143,000 as a placeholder for providing security at Progress Place. I want to thank Councilmember Hucker for his leadership on this issue. Appreciate him stepping forward to show real leadership in organizing our community and acknowledging this is not a short-term problem. It's something that we have to address holistically, but in the short term, we do have to address the safety and security needs of our very important staff at Progress Place. And then we added $175,000 on the reconciliation list, also as a placeholder to expand the safe passages monitor exchange. I do want to defer to Linda. There is a small update on this item that she's in a better position to provide. So Linda, if you could talk briefly about that, that'd be great.
Right. I also wanted just to say there's an update in your packet to the costs on Progress Place for the 24/7 position, and we also have an update on safe passages. So let me just say on safe passages, we were able early to confirm the cost of the program staff and the security for expanding, but general services had to go out and look at the building. It is an old school building, and so the cost of creating an extra room for supervised visitation is quite large. It right now is looking like $175,000 for the facility. So it's potentially that it might be best to let DGS look longer at the facility so that we make sure we know we can actually get the visitation room in place before moving forward with the contract costs for security and for the provider services. I don't think this in any way is changing the council's, or at least the joint committee's commitment to wanting to expand the hours, but I think that the facility cost is far beyond what we sort of thought it would be, which might be like, $15,000 or $20,000. So that information came recently, and it was really their first look, but it is an old building. And so when you make a new room, there are electrical and HVAC and a lot of other issues that have to be addressed. And then if you go back to the Progress Place issue, there is an update that had the costs for a 24/7 security officer. This is a county security officer that is in the police department, but is security officer, and they would need to hire new positions to go to 24/7, and they would be able to start in October, and the cost of that is $287,000 in FY20. You could use the $83,000 that the executive included in the budget to offset some of that cost, and then there's also $43,000 for security cameras, which was in Mr. Hucker's initial memo, and that was confirmed by the police department, but it's really the cost of having 24/7 security that's different from what the placeholder was. And then there was also, just as a question, if there was some overtime that was wanted between July and October when you could go 24/7. The department is a little limited because they only have a certain pool of employees that can provide overtime, but they did think they could provide some, and that was estimated to be another $26,000.
Okay, I do have some lights for this item. Councilmember Hooker.
Thank you, Madam President. I didn't want to interrupt the chairman. You were on such a good roll. But I appreciate the support of so many of you that were there for the joint session on this. The need continues to be there. We deferred at the time to Ms. McMillan to come up with an updated number, and now we have the updated number. So I'd move that we move the update the number from 143,000 to 287,000 for the rec list.
Second.
Okay, so we have a motion from Councilmember Hooker and a second by Councilmember Albornoz. I do have some other lights. Councilmember Katz.
We have the 83,000.
Thank you, Madam President. Actually, I wanted to speak to safe passages. Do you want to vote on this first?
Okay, is there any objection to this proposal? There's a comment by Councilmember Reamer.
I really support this. I think we need the security and the really enhanced level of service. My only question is there any measure where today we don't have security at all? Or, Linda, what's the status of security? Your mic, please.
My understanding right now is that Shepherd's Table, which is one of the nonprofit organizations that is in Progress Place, does hire some security themselves, but there is no security provided through county government at the time.
And that security is funded through the contract that we have with them. Yeah.
My only worry is that it's now a significant amount of money. We're talking, what was the total, Linda, you said?
It's 287,000.
280. Maybe we can get that done. It'd be great if we could just get that done. I'm worried that if we can't get the votes for 280,000, that we have nothing. And I wonder, isn't there some sort of interim or halfway approach where if there's not support for 280,000, there might be support for, 12 hours of security a day or something? What was the
So I think
exploration of different approaches?
Well, so I think there's two things. I think that the department has been trying to work with the providers who are in Progress Place and with the community to see if there were critical hours, even in fiscal 19, where some security could be provided. It's been hard to come up with a smaller number, but the request was around, I would just say the request was around 24/7. Clearly we could provide something lesser, but you do need to increase the FTEs in the police department because there's a small pool of security. So I would have to check with them. So for example, if on average you wanted to do 12 hours a day instead of 24 hours a day, I could go back and check with them and get a different number of whether that would be like 3 FTEs and some overtime or what that might be.
I mean, we're sort of running out of time a little bit, but again, I just say I'm prepared to support the full amount. If there's a majority that's prepared to support that, then I think we're fine. But if not, I think we might want to explore less costly steps so that we don't end up with nothing.
Okay, anybody else who wants to speak specifically to this before we vote? Any objection to the motion? All right, I think I may have to, Councilmember Jawanda, you would like to speak to that? Okay, go ahead, Mr. Glass.
Thank you. A really important need in the community, as the district council member said during the HHS committee hearing, and having been to that facility about 3 or 4 times now in the last 4 months, it's real. And just to illuminate Mr. Reamer as to the situation and the monies there, the request by Mr. Hooker was for 24/7 service because basically there's very little service right now, and I would defer to the District 5 council member, but in speaking with the community, with the nonprofit providers and the residents around there, there are various ways to move forward. Daytime security, evening security, that does get to the question that you were alluding to. But in the broader scheme of things, it's all needed to make sure that community is safe. And as it relates to the property, the security that we're speaking about, just to be clear, is only confined to that property. It does not extend to the sidewalk and to Georgia Avenue where Progress Place is, and that is a police department function. Just to illuminate.
Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Mr. Glass, and thank you, Council President, and thank you, Mr. Hucker, for putting this forward. I also will support the full amount. I think you're going to be all right on the 247, at least from my perspective. It's needed. I also want to flag that there's other things we're going to need to do there, and so I think, whether it's finding an area for people to gather or making sure that when there's severe cold that every inch of that place isn't covered with mats. I mean, the building itself has structural issues. So this is something we're going to have to come back to. So I just want to signal to my colleagues that I think we're going to have to make this amount and we're going to have to do more. This is serving a huge need for many people, and the building, unfortunately, wasn't built the way we all would have wanted, but that nonetheless, the need continues to be there, and we're going to need to make the proper investments. So I certainly will support it and look forward to working with you and others to fix the other more structural issues.
Okay, so I haven't heard any objection. Let me just reiterate that. Is there any objection to the motion? No? Okay, so we'll go ahead and place that. And then I know some people had some questions regarding safe passage. Okay, so we got Council Vice President Katz.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I too am concerned about safe passages. The whole idea that we would increase for the 10 hours, additional 10 hours per week, I think is something that is very, very necessary. I think that it was mentioned that they thought that, or someone thought, that it was only going to cost about $23,000 to make this change, and now you're saying it's $175,000.
So when we met, we didn't have, what we had was the $133,000, which is the program staff, and the $23,000, which was for the security, and those were verified. But the proposal didn't have any first look at the facility. There was a comment that there was a large room that could be partitioned into 2 rooms. But General Services has gone out and done a preliminary look, and given the age of the building, and the things that would need to be done to make 2 secure enough rooms to have this supervised visitation, their initial estimate is about $175,000. I'm not saying that's their final, but they did get that back to me recently, and so it does change what the thought was about how easy it would be to create this second space.
Well, and I appreciate it, but perhaps we don't have to have 2 complete separate rooms. Perhaps there could be a room that's partitioned in a safe manner. And so I believe we need to go back and figure how we can do this. $175,000 is obviously a lot of money for this, but I believe we need to figure out a way that we can do it that would be safe and efficient, so that we can get the additional 10 hours per week. This is really life-saving in many cases. We're working with people that have a lot of difficulty with working together with their own children, with a spouse or a former spouse dealing with their own children. And so I think we have to do it. I think we have to figure out a way to do it that's not as expensive maybe as having 2 complete separate rooms, but having a partition room that this would work. So I don't know what that does for the actual money on the listing, but I don't think it should be lost on this. I think we need to make certain that this money is available. Thanks.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And so I'm going to echo what Council Vice President Katz said, but I'm a little bit confused because if we're talking about hours of operation, we're not expanding space. In fact, the space requirement should be less. If I spread out the amount of time in which a finite group of people can access, I don't need more space. I mean, I would arguably need just the same amount of space.
We can continue to look at it. All that I know is that what was asked in the proposal that the council received was to make another room that could be used for supervised visitation, and that was part of the staffing structure that was proposed along with the additional hours. So, we can continue.
Right, so they were separate, though. There was one that was with hours, and there was one that was with space. They weren't conflated together.
There was one there was one package of staffing that came to you, and it included having another visitation room.
Okay, well, I think that we need to separate them because certainly it's the hours that's the most important piece of this. The hours will allow for us to actually serve the more people that are the waiting list, which was the main reason of why we were doing this to begin with, was to get those folks off of the waiting list so that they could get in. However we need to restructure this, Linda, that would be my suggestion, Mr. Chair, to make sure that we restructure this in a way that's just solely with the hours. And if we get a number with the hours, I know that's a lot cheaper than dealing with the actual structural space. So if we could do that and get that quickly, that would be, I think, helpful for us moving forward.
Dr. Kroll, anything you want to add?
Good morning. Raymond Kroll, Chief of Behavioral Health and Crisis Services. Just to clarify, the hours and the structure were put together because there's a supervised visitation process, and right now the hours would add time to staff and security, et cetera, but the space was to take 3 visitation rooms and create a 4th one. And so so part of the question maybe, can they continue that in some kind of hodgepodge way until we can get the 4th space squared away? So.
Okay, so we'll come back to that item. All right, Councilmember Reamer. Your light was on.
I think that might have been left over from
the earlier. Okay, great. Councilmember Albornoz.
Okay, thank you. So appreciate that feedback. The next item is Crittenden Services, one of our outstanding providers in Montgomery County, received a unique opportunity just this past week and a request for a match of $150,000 grant award from the VNS Foundation. Their memo is attached in circles 111A through 111C. And as described with these funds, Crittenden would be able to deliver 3 youth development programs. Their Sneakers, Pearls, and Goal Setting Girls program at Banneker, Briggs Cheney, Key, and White Oak Middle School, as well as Springbrook and Paint Branch High Schools. I can tell you, wearing my old hat in the Recreation Department, Crittenden is one of our outstanding nonprofit providers. Not only do they carry out really extraordinarily strong service, but they're one of the organizations that leverages their resources well. And so I would like to move that we place $150,000 on the reconciliation list to match the grant award from the VNS Foundation.
Okay. All right, so it's been by Councilmember Now, seconded by Councilmember Rice and Hucker, I believe. And I want to thank my colleagues as well, Albornoz and Hucker and Councilmember Rice for seconding that. I think this is an amazing opportunity, especially as we seek to look for innovative ways to fund the very important work in our communities, and this leverages private funding, which is awesome. So it would be great if we could, give them those matching funds as well. So this is really great work by the Crittenden Foundation, Crittenden Services, in seeking ways to expand their impact, and I just appreciate everybody's indulgence in this. So I think, is there any objection in placing the 150? Councilmember Joanna wants to say something. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you to my colleagues for the proposal. I also am in favor of it, and just want to thank Crittenden for being innovative and, as the Council President said, seeking outside funding, leveraging, and really having seen this program up close, you get great bang for your buck, and not. I'm not just saying that as the daughter of the father's 3 daughters. I think you guys, they're not old enough to be in your program yet, but you guys do great work, and I'm excited about that you're going to be able to expand to 6 schools with this money. And so I just would, hopefully we can get this off the reconciliation list as well, so you can really continue providing your great service. So thank you to my colleagues for adding it.
All right. Okay, is there any objection to adding? Councilmember Rice.
Just very, very quickly. I supported the expansion of Crittenden when Crittenden came to the Up County, and it was tremendously important. I know that then Director Pam and I had a conversation about the need that was there, and she quickly realized how much need was there. That same, if not more, need is in the East County, and I really appreciate us continuing to expand the opportunity for this great program to reach a lot of our young girls and young women in the East County. This is going to be transformative, and I've seen the work in the Up-County area. I've seen the transformation that's happened, so I've seen the benefits of this program, and so I certainly can attest to its efficacy in terms of really getting where we need to be. So this is great, and I encourage all of my colleagues to please get this off of the reconciliation list. It is incredibly important. So.
All right. So without objection, we'll place this on the reconciliation list. And again, want to really thank Ms. Jones for your leadership and finding that private funder. We really like those types of proposals, so we'll be looking at this very closely. Thank you. Councilor Bernos.
Thank you. Madam President, I do have a question. So there were 2 additional memos that came in over the weekend to support some additional services that cross over into the Health and Human Services Committee. One of them was a request by Council Members Katz, Rice, Hucker, and Friedson to add some additional funds to the reconciliation list for the Ivy Mount School's request that they make improvements necessary to ensure student safety. Manna Foods, an additional $75,000 for improvements necessary to their valuable distribution hub. All right, great. Never mind.
I'm sorry.
Channeling my Gilda Radner
These
again.
they're cost-sharing grants that relate to HHS but are on the afternoon's agenda, I think item 8.
Perfecto. All right, we'll
Thank
wait
you.
until this afternoon.
So, question answered. All right, so I spent a great deal of time going through most of the issues that are listed also within the packet. I just want to highlight 2 for my colleagues that we hadn't discussed. One is the Crossroads Youth Opportunity Center, which is a joint partnership between Prince George's and Montgomery County, critically important to provide support structure for our youth. We did receive an update that Prince George's is no longer supporting that bi-county effort, and so we did discuss with a new administration in Prince George's County taking that issue up in the upcoming year because if we're able to, we must do a cross-jurisdictional effort if we're really going to truly address the holistic needs of those students. And we also discussed the East County Opportunity Zone, and we look forward to the new Director of Health and Human Services coming on board because there's been great effort and work done in that space, and we obviously want to ensure that it continues through the transition to the current administration. But with that, that is the Health and Human Services Committee specifically, and I'll defer to see if Linda and Vivian have any additional thoughts or questions, or make sure I didn't miss something.
I just wanted to raise one item, which was that the committee approved recommended approval of the CIP amendments that for Avery Road Treatment Center and Dennis Avenue Health Center. There was increased cost related to the bids that came in for the project, so they transferred money from the Dennis Avenue Health Center to Avery Road, and subsequently we also learned that we received an additional $525,000 in state aid, so they switched that out from the GO bonds.
Excellent. I have a light. Councilmember Friedson.
Yeah, I just had more of a broad comment. First off, I wanted to commend and thank the chair for his leadership on the DD supplement and some of the conversation that you just mentioned and the work of the committee. I think one of the best things that we do in Montgomery County is our partnership with the nonprofit community in order to provide core critical services to some of the most vulnerable people in our community. This has obviously generated a tremendous amount of concern and uncertainty with the continuity of those services that so many of our residents depend on. And so I just really appreciate your leadership, Councilmember Albornoz, for that. And I did also want to note the VITA services. I'm really glad that that was added. Appreciate the committee's work on that. In my previous role in the Comptroller's office, this is one of the most important organizations to provide tax preparation services and financial resources to low-income residents who lack the ability to access that, and our tax code is getting more and more complicated, unfortunately, with really bad ideas, mostly from the federal government, some bad ideas from from right here in the great state of Maryland, but most from Capitol Hill. And so I think that is just critically important to help navigate that. And I did just finally want to highlight there are a tremendous number of really important programs that were listed and added to the reconciliation list. And I know that we're going to have and continue to have robust discussions of how we fit all of those into our limited resources, since they're all worthwhile. But the Every Mind request that Councilmember Jawando and I worked together on, that appreciate the support of the committee and hope to have the support of the full council as we have this conversation that started today about mental health and how there is no health without mental health. That is critical, and mental health is not personal health, it's public health, as Mr. Kroll mentioned earlier. And this is just one small aspect of increasing the number of hours that we provide texting hotline services, which is a really important way that those who are facing really severe circumstances can reach out in a comfortable setting, in a way that young people are communicating regularly, on their turf, in their terms, to be able to talk about some of these challenges. It's my hope that this is just the beginning of that expansion, that we expand from 9 p.m. to 12 p.m. this year, and we look at making this even more expansive, because these nighttime hours are a time at which they are extremely vulnerable, because they're tend to be isolated and often alone at some of the times where they can be most at risk. And so hope to have the support of my colleagues, appreciate working together with many of you on this, and look forward to expanding this in future years to make sure that we're providing the mental health resources our young people desperately need.
Councilmember Glass.
Thank you. I just wanted to briefly say, this being the first budget process for me and serving on the HHS committee, this was a humbling experience to see the great need that we already provide in the base budget and the needs that we need to continue providing. And as Chair Albornoz said, I appreciate the thoughtful conversations, the hard decisions, amongst the council members and amongst, I think, everybody on the council weighed in on issues related to HHS. So I thank your thoughts, ideas, and robust conversation. And ultimately, this is why I'm serving on the county council, to really help with some of the basic needs, whether it's basic health care, mental health care, positive youth development, all of which is really housed in HHS. So thank you, Chair Albornoz, for leading us through this process.
Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Madam President, and also want to thank the chair for not only his leadership, but also the extensive and very thorough explanation that you went through. You set the bar high, sir, so thank you very much for doing that. I did want to call out two things. I want to thank Councilmember Rice for fighting to get the $150,000 for the three health programs, the initiatives for the African American, Latino, and Asian community. And I just want to underscore how important that is. We have a great Dr. Gales, and we know how many disparities there are, and it's pretty unfortunate that we have so many in the healthcare arena for our communities of color. And I think these initiatives are doing more than their fair share to get services and information out, and to split $150,000 between the three of them, I think is very important. So just want to urge my colleagues, as we have these very important conversations, and there's many good things on the list, I think this is something we all definitely need to support. And I also wanted to second, it was great to work with Councilmember Friedson on Every Mind's expansion of the text service for the evening hours. I also have put on 2 mental health therapists to expand to 4 schools, to expand the ability, particularly in middle schools. I can't tell you how many middle school students, all students, but that I've heard from, that they just want someone to talk to and they need access. And so I know, again, we have a lot of things on here, but I couldn't not say anything since it's Mental Health Awareness Month, and we just did that great proclamation. I think getting 2 new people at $100,000 each to cover 4 new schools, and our middle schools are so large, I think it would be a great use of resources. So thank you to my colleagues, and thank you to the chair.
Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President, and I really want to thank, excuse me, the chair for stepping into some very big shoes. You know, Councilmember Leventhal, who chaired Health and Human Services for a very long time, knew so much about this budget, knew so much about this space, and in a short period of time, you've really rolled up your sleeves and embraced and really immersed yourself in Health and Human Services and done a tremendous job. So I really want to just give you kudos for doing that, because this is not easy. And being able to balance, you know, what you've heard from my colleagues is that all of these things are incredibly important. There isn't a single thing that we have on this rec list that wasn't something that was proposed by our community that we don't need. That's the interesting thing. It's not that we don't need it. It's just we're trying to balance between what we can afford and what we think we may be able to put off in being able to afford this year. That's what kind of struggles, and that's what Councilmember Glass, who's new to this committee, has already in the short period of time been able to understand and grasp. It's tough. It's really hard to be able to try and balance between all these things that are so important that we all know would make a tremendous difference in people's lives in various sectors of our communities. And it's one in which it speaks to part of the challenges that we had before. And I just want to reiterate for folks that are sitting at home that might be wondering why it is that we made the decisions that we made before earlier today when it came to contract affordability for some of our employees. Those millions of dollars that are going to be saved in current year funding by adjusting some of the employee contracts are going to fund these very causes that folks are talking about right now, and still won't be able to cover the majority of them that we know are going to do good work in our community. That's the reality that we find ourselves in. And so from that perspective, and these things are things that benefit all of us as a community. So the same very employees may have a child with special needs, may have some other sorts of, child with mental health issues, may have a mental health issue in their family. You know, they may have, a child who's experiencing some of the challenges, or an older parent who they're trying to care for and who needs, some sort of respite services. These are all things that encompass all of us as a community. And so when we try and balance our budget, we truly are balancing the needs. And especially when it comes to Health and Human Services, it's one where we know we find a lot of our folks who are most at risk. And we want to try and keep them afloat for as long as we can with providing them as many buoys as possible, understanding that we may not be able to always pluck them out of the water. But we try and do what we can. And I certainly just want to, again, say thank you to Chair Albornoz for his great work. I know that working with Councilmember Glass, we now have a very strong continued commitment when it comes to Health and Human Services here in this county. And I look forward to certainly seeing, while Ms. Buckland, you've done a great job as our interim, I look forward to having a person who's there in a finite position that's going to be able to help take us to the next level, continue to innovate when it comes to our Health and Human Services space. So thank you guys very much for all of your great work. I really appreciate it, and I think we've made Montgomery County an even better place to live. So I'm just very proud.
Well, one of the biggest responsibility of a council president in a year of major transition is to select chairs and members of different committees. And I have to say that, I'm very happy that that particular selection that I made, Councilmember Albornoz, given all of your experience before, I knew would be so important, because as some of the new council members and members of the HHS committee now appreciate, is that this particular committee, it's where the action really is comprised. And it is, you have to have such heart to be able to balance all of these needs. And so, for all the people that talk about Montgomery County being, so wealthy and that we don't have any issues, well, just come to a couple of sessions in the HHS committee and you'll find out. But the truth is that, this is the committee where the people that we are serving are not necessarily the people that, are out there very visible, or not necessarily the people that are going to come out and, show up at time of elections. I feel like this committee is, for me, the one place where I find the truth of why I ran for office, and I can, say that for my colleagues as well. And you mentioned Councilmember Leventhal. I mean, it was no doubt that that's where the heart is. So thank you so much for all the work and the members, because, it continues to be a challenge, and I think every year we try to add a little bit more balance and to address this and try to find ways to leverage everything. And I would be remiss if I didn't also thank Ms. McMillan and Ms. Yao, who have been for so many years also carrying all of the analysis and, setting all the priorities. Councilmember Katz, a comment, and then we'll take a vote.
Just a comment. I did want to mention that Councilmember Hucker and I are very pleased that Councilmember Albornoz is on public safety as well. He does a very good job there. Didn't want it to get lost in the shuffle. Thank you.
We just love you, Councilmember Albornoz. All right. Kumbaya. All right, so with that, hey, everybody gets a turn. Everybody gets a turn. All right, so without all those in favor of adopting the HHS committee recommendations for the budget as amended, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay. Now to item 3. Not sure who's going to chair this. Is this Councilmember Rice or Councilmember Albornoz? Councilmember Rice.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And so, when we have joint meetings between Health and Human Services and our Education and Culture Committee, I'm so happy to have Councilmember Albornoz as my joint committee chair. Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly.
I hope my kids are watching this at home.
How about Catherine?
Yeah, exactly. Trust me, Councilmember Albornoz, this is one you want to save for your wife. I promise you, you'll need it at some point. You'll be like, honey, this is the great work I'm doing. This is why they love me so much. This is why I can't be at home. No. Anyway, look, early care and education is incredibly important to us, and one in which you'll see as a part of some of the recommendations. And I really want to tout, as we're singing praises of folks, the leadership of our council president, as well as the leadership of Councilmember Reamer, two folks who have very, very much rolled up their sleeves when it comes to early care and education and really made it a focus and a passion. It really ties into the great work that we've been working on at the state level when it comes to the Kerwin Commission and my fortunate ability to be able to serve in that capacity. This is really important to us because we know that if we're truly going to address our equity gap that we see in our schools, that it starts with access to early care and education. So I'm going to turn over to Ms. Yao to just walk us through some of the salient points, but just wanted to say that when we're shifting some of our money to make sure that MCPS has its ability to be more flexible in this space, adding some of our numbers when it comes to our school health nurses, as well as the Every Mind piece that you heard about a little bit earlier for the confidential text and chat service as a part of the school-based health and mental health services, when we're talking about the mental health therapists, the linkages to learning, the cluster projects. These are all things that are continuing to make ourselves stronger as the true community schools model, one in which encompasses not just working within our school system and within the school walls to make sure we're addressing the needs of our students, but also making sure that those wraparound services are there to provide for our community as a whole to get them involved and engaged when it comes to our particular issues. So, Ms. Yao, if you just wanted to walk us through just very quickly some of the salient points, I think that they're pretty straightforward, as we can see in the cover memo that you gave us.
I just wanted to add quick thing.
Council President.
I, again, for the record, just really, truly want to thank my colleagues. I think one of the first things I did early in January was meet with each and every one of you to share this particular blueprint, this framework for early care and education that I had worked with Ms. Yao, with my office staff, really taking into consideration the input of all my colleagues, Councilmember Reamer, Councilmember Rice, and trying to find a way for us to then move ahead with a particular framework. I am so excited that we are now able to address the issue of funding via this NDA. It's so important that every year we take a look at this. I want to say also that I'm very happy that we did recommend language that would mean that anytime there's going to be some kind of expenditure larger than $500,000, that we are constantly receiving reports, et cetera, because it's great to have a framework and it's great to have support and it's great to have the money. We need to make sure that we are working together to monitor how this is rolling out and how all of us can, through our own networks and our expertise, leverage any kind and solve any issue that might come up along the way. This is really groundbreaking for Montgomery County. We have talked about this for so many years. Everybody talks about early care and education. Everybody talks about the importance. Everybody talks about the ROI. But to actually come together and put differences aside and say, we're on this, we will work with the state, we will work locally, we will put money where our mouth is, in my opinion, is really, truly outstanding. So thank you to everyone and the executive as well for really working so hard to get us here. And now I can't wait to see how we begin to move forward in implementing this very important initiative. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
So I'll just go really quickly through some of the details. There is a recommendation to shift about $1,007,411 from the proposed early care and education NDA to be appropriated in Montgomery County Public Schools for their new Up-County Early Childhood Center. There is an additional $1,234,200, again, in 6 increments of $205,700 to add 2 school health nurses positions per increment. Again, the Joint Committee heard about the current level of school health nurse staffing, and we're very concerned that that level would not be adequate to ensure the health and safety of students, given the high ratios and increasing complexity of health conditions and regulatory requirements. There was the Councilmember Friesen and Councilmember Jawando already spoke to the $54,750 to expand the Every Minds confidential text and chat services. And Councilmember Jawando also spoke to adding $200,000 to the reconciliation list in 2 increments of $100,000 to fund the full-time licensed mental health therapists at middle schools. There was 2 items related to linkages to learning consistent with their strategic planning process to provide full staffing complement at Kemp Mill Elementary School for $39,017, and then at Summit Hall Elementary School for $36,629. The Joint Committees expressed a need to expand school-based health, mental health, and social services in a seamless, intentional way, and requested that a work group convene this summer to review the most recent EverFarms lists and develop recommendations for the rollout of linkages services in schools to inform the fiscal year 21 to 26 CIP discussions. There was also a request from Councilmember Hucker to restore funding for the Springbrook and Paint Branch High School cluster project of $287,275, so that was also added to the reconciliation list. And one other thing, the Joint Committees recommended approval of the CIP amendment for linkages to learning and school-based health centers projects, which funded linkages space at Lee and Silver Spring International Middle Schools and Gaithersburg, the new Gaithersburg Cluster Elementary School, and Cresthaven and Roscoe Nix Elementary Schools.
Councilor Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. I did want to sort of underscore how shocking it is, the ratio of school health nurses that we have within Montgomery County compared to other jurisdictions regionally. I had not seen that number before, that chart. And our school health nurses are such a critical frontline measure, particularly as it relates to mental health issues and the other issues that we're seeing across the board within MCPS. And so I do think there has to be a strong effort, certainly not just this year, but beyond this year, to help increase those staffing levels so that we have a fighting chance to meet the needs that are occurring every day within our schools. And so I just wanted to underscore that point and how unbelievable that was as we deliberated through the process.
Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. I do have to say that I was a bit disappointed that the executive did not respond to the letter that we sent in terms of sending over some kind of a supplemental to address this, because it is very shocking. So we'll see what we can do with the reconciliation list, but it seems to me that definitely the Joint Committee that, should take this up to see how we can work a plan to begin to phase this in. I mean, this is about safety and health. These are not, nice to have. So I do believe that we need to get, a lot more serious in addressing this issue. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you very much. I am really pleased to see these recommendations moving forward. And while we're on the topic of the HHS committee and its work with ENC, I want to join my colleagues in thanking Councilmember Albornoz for his tremendous work in his first budget session as chair. And I want to thank Mr. Rice for his continuing advocacy for education and his work on the Kerwin Commission. The budget that we have before us continues to make investments in important programs that I am really strongly supportive of, so I'm very enthusiastic about the Joint Committee's recommendations. A few years ago, we began to expand part-day programs and make them full day. We began to expand school-based programs. Councilmember Rice particularly pushed the needle on targeting investments through MCPS, which MCPS's enthusiasm resulted in the McDonald-Knowles early education facility opening up, and now we have a parallel or a mirrored proposal in the Up County for a new early education center there. I think it's a terrific model. It's amazing what MCPS can do when provided resources to tackle the job. And really just want to encourage my colleagues to keep the focus on expansion and providing as much support to MCPS as we can marshal. The other major areas, expanding part day to full day, expanding Head Start, these are critical early education investments. I certainly want to keep my eye on the subsidies, the child care subsidies, and I note that we're claiming about $3 million in unspent subsidy funds from the past 2 years. So I hope that we'll get a recommendation through this group soon about how we can better spend our subsidy dollars so that they don't stack up unspent. That's kind of not what we want to do. But overall, this continues the progress that we're making. It adds several $1 million in new funding to early education, and I'm really pleased by that. And I join my colleagues in strong support.
Chairman Rice.
So thank you very much for all of those comments. And I did just want to share with my colleagues as your council representative to the Maryland Association of Counties, and then therefore my service on the Kerwin Commission, that I've been asked by Chair Kerwin to actually serve on the next iteration of Kerwin that actually deals with funding and deals with those funding formulas, which will be incredibly important when it comes to us this summer. So as we meet to discuss, Councilmember Reamer, as you were alluding to, the next iterations of where we go in terms of expansion for early childhood, and Madam President, as we work within your blueprint framework, it's going to be incredibly important to tie those pieces together. So I look forward to working with my colleagues to make sure that all of those priorities, not just for the state as a whole, but for this county, are represented. It's going to be a great opportunity for us because we are now positioned well when it comes to being able to utilize the resources that are going to come from the state when it comes to helping to support the expansion of early child care and education opportunities. This is tremendous for us, and I want to encourage our private providers that are out there to continue to reach out to us, to ask us for support, to work with the state, because this will be a very quick-moving ball. I can tell you that I've been talking with folks in Annapolis, and one of the things to remember is that the new Speaker of the House was also a member of the Kerwin Commission. She actually served on the pre-K work group with me. And so from that perspective, she certainly has an interest in moving early child care and education forward. And so from that perspective, I think that we are positioning ourselves well with what we're doing here today. So just wanted to put that out there.
Okay, I don't see any other lights. So with that, we have a recommendation before us, and it has a lot of very important components. So all those in favor in adopting the HHS and EC committee recommended budget for early care and education in other areas, please raise your hand. That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, so the next item is item 3.5, and this is an item that we discussed in the Government Operations and Fiscal Policy Committee. It's one of our budgets. It was pulled out of the consent calendar for further discussion, and this is OMB. And what I can report is that the GO committee recommended adoption of this budget. There were no recommended changes for the overall budget. There was one item in particular, though, that did have a 2-to-1 vote, and it had to do with an increase of $100,000 for contractual information technology support to help transition to a 2-year operating budget cycle and a 10-year fiscal plan. We had a robust conversation about whether this item was ready for prime time, if you will. Councilmember Friedson was uncertain that this contractual support could be completed in time for the FY 21-22 budget process. Also, we overall had some concerns about the aggressive implementation timeframe, and the fact that the council has not been, involved, and given the large role that the council plays in the obvious budget cycle, that there was some concerns regarding this. And so we did, of course, ask that we have further discussions with the committee and the council about the transition to a 2-year budget cycle after the council approves the FY20 operating budget. I would say that Councilmember Katz and I, felt that, having expressed those concerns, that we felt that it was all right to go ahead and provide this funding so that the executive can begin to explore all of this. There was some conversation about whether we needed a charter amendment or not, and OMB Director Medellino can share with us a little bit more about that thinking, but I know that, he discussed with us that there are different ways to achieve this goal. One of them could be similar to what we do with our CIP, where we might have a year where you do, just very light amendments and things of that nature, but then you have the next year where you do much more in depth, and in that case, you don't necessarily need a charter amendment. I will remind my colleagues that we have had in different committees a lot of conversation about the frustration that we feel sometimes that there doesn't seem to be enough time in the fiscal year to go into real in-depth analysis and evaluation, discussion regarding some of the outcomes that we put forth, because we're in this constant fiscal year cycle trying to figure out what it is that we need, trying to fit it through our sort of strategic vision, and then all of a sudden you're like back into the executive creating a brand new budget proposal. And so this idea of some type of a modified cycle seems attractive, at least when it comes to this notion of us also providing our oversight function in a much more in-depth way than what we have now, given just the overall cycle. I will also point to my colleagues that one of the things that I think I had mentioned was, also through GO, I've been thinking through, what if we also put in place almost a schedule for the council to, in the fall, when we come back from recess, to have certain weeks where we have actually assigned oversight agendas in our different committees, so that we can literally force ourselves and the committee schedules to incorporate this, because right now, again, it seems like we're in budget session, we go into summer, we come back, in the fall, the executive is putting together the budget, and we're, reacting to a lot of the legislation, et cetera. So there's a lot, I think, that we can look at in terms of strengthening and updating our processes. Nothing says that we have to continue to do things exactly the way that it has been done for decades, given the growth of the not only the budget, but also the challenges that we face every day. So with all of that, this is what the GO committee recommended. And let me just first turn it over to Mr. Madalino if you want to expand a little bit on that particular proposal of the 2-year cycle and the 10-year fiscal plan. Anything I left out?
No, Madam President, I think you did a wonderful job of summarizing the conversation that we had in the committee. I'm joined by Jennifer Bryant, who many of you know for years from OMB. She's been spearheading a lot of our work on the operating budget this year with no set operating budget coordinator. We have started robust conversations internally with OMB in partnership with the county stat, in partnership now with the county executive's office, trying to work through what will outcome-based budgeting look like? What will a two-year budgeting cycle look like? How do you marry those two together? In the GO committee, we talked a little bit about the models that come out of the state of Washington, and in particular, King County and the city of Seattle, who have 2-year budgeting cycles. I think it is the city of Seattle that has, they don't have a 2-year budget in the context of they enact a budget and they don't come back for 2 years. They do it much akin to our approach to the CIP. The big year and the second year is amendments to the previous plan. Seattle uses the term the endorsed budget. So they have the fiscal year budget and the following year it's called the endorsed budget, and then they make amendments to the endorsed budget. Obviously, because of revenues, you'd have to make changes every year, and I think it would be a work in progress trying to figure out how we stick to that sort of structure. Internally, we've had conversations, and I know I spoke to Councilmember Reamer Friday afternoon. We need, as soon as we get out of this budget cycle, to sit down, starting with you, with the council staff, and start to lay out what this would look like. We're trying to think through, in both doing outcomes budgeting and the 2-year budget, maybe we pick an alignment of departments and start with them on a 2-year cycle so that we don't try the whole enterprise all at once. We try a handful of agencies. We have to work through the county attorney's office and I think also the attorney general's office as to what would a 2-year budget look like with MCPS, with the whole maintenance of effort requirement in law. If we pass a budget that assumes one level of enrollment and it's lower in that second year, have we inadvertently triggered the maintenance of effort rule? Because obviously you all know once you set a target, if you go lower than that target, people feel as if you've made a reduction in what was promised, and we don't want to get into that situation. When you look at the nuts and bolts of budgeting, part of the conversation we had last week was starting to, and this is where this money for the consultants is so helpful, is starting to pull apart some of our departments into different programmatic items. You're used to looking at departments by department, division, and programs, but some of those programs, what we have now, may not be what you want moving forward when you're trying to align things by outcomes. HHS is a wonderful example. They have pieces that fit into sort of a criminal justice cluster. They have pieces that fit into a health cluster. They have pieces that fit into other clusters or alignments of programs. And how do you pull those apart and put them together in a way that makes sense for you, for the executive, and for the public to understand what they're funding and what they're getting in return? I don't know, if we're going to spend that whole $100,000. I know OMB has a tradition, I think, of being judicious with its expenditures, and we would certainly do that again with that funding. I'm happy to answer questions about the 2-year cycle, what we know of it, the results-based budgeting, what our vision is. But I know this is a work in progress, and it's only going to work with your engagement, with the staff engagement, and quite frankly, with the public engagement. And I think that's the vision and outline that the county executive has provided when he's talked about this approach to budgeting.
Thank you. Councilmember Reamer.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Madaleno, for that description. I would recommend that we create some kind of an OLO process, OLO-supported process to work with OMB on how we evaluate this. I generally just want to say, I think it goes without saying, I think we all know that the budget authority is one of the council's primary authorities, and so the council is going to have a strong interest in however that might be modified. Listening to your description now, and as we discussed last Friday, I'm open to the idea of how would this work? And to the extent that we need some technology in order to even understand how it would work, I'm willing to embrace piloting this and designing it and getting a sense of what it might mean so that we can then evaluate. Well, I think that's a concurrent evaluation, frankly, but so that we can really evaluate what it might mean for us. I think the narrative is important. I don't think the council should, in supporting this appropriation, indicate that it supports the 2-year budget cycle. And I think if you read the council's staff's packet, you could walk away thinking that the council is embracing moving towards a 2-year budget cycle. But I don't think we want to say that at this time. But I understand, like, if we don't provide some support, then how are you supposed to even model this? How are you supposed to really even think it through? And then it would be kind of too late to start again next year. So this seems like an important window to allow some work to be done. And as you described, an approach, I don't want to prejudge how it might begin, but for example, an approach that works with certain departments that are very stable and not a lot of controversies, might help us understand what we're talking about. But I do think there's a lot to be discussed. So, not only do I think we ought to have some kind of council staff OLO partnership so that we're apprised of this conversation as we go, but I think the full council, and I respect the role of the GO committee, but now we're really talking about the authority of the Montgomery County Council. I think this should be a full council deliberation. And so I don't know how you'd structure that. It could be a series of conversations over the summer or in the fall, but I think that we need our staff to explain to us, this is how it's going to affect your process. And we need to hear that from our staff, very, very clearly, so that there's no confusion. And we don't want to have to, say, oh, well, OMB is characterizing it this way, and like let's hear it from our institution. So again, the way it's been explained, you'd like to figure out how to do this with some set of departments, perhaps, and you want to do a lot of exploration on the background, legal issues, charter issues, all that kind of stuff. I think the county council, as an institution, has to be at the table, or it's going to seem it's just not going to be right. So I don't know how we're going to do that. I would maybe ask the council president for some thoughts on that point.
Sure, and I'll say, reclaiming my, authority as GO chair, I don't believe that the committee at any moment, took this, at least the majority of us, took this as we're approving the 2-year budget, shift. What we saw was you know, and this is something that we had discussed in the past, was the executive wanted to have some funding to begin to explore how that would work out. I appreciate, Councilmember Reamer, your interest, and no doubt that this is going to have to become a, you know, entire council discussion and exploration and analysis. So I think that we need to come up with, you know, Ms. Michelson, with a process through which we will then engage in that conversation. I mean, I sort of take the executive, you know, at face value when he has said that this would be a joint exploration. For the purposes of the budget, though, and within OMB, they're requesting $100,000 to begin their sort of exploration, and that's obviously what I was focusing on. At no time did we say, you know, yes, go ahead, OMB, and go ahead and move towards, let us know how it goes. It was kind of like, it was, no, we didn't. It was just, you know, yes, I think you can start exploring that, and then we're going to have to, obviously, outside the budget, work through how all of this might work out. But it, you know, it is not a simple change, and it is not a simple shift. It would not work unless the council is absolutely involved every step of the way. It just wouldn't. So, you know, that is how the committee discussed it.
And I totally agree with you, Madam President. And I don't think this is in any way a backdoor attempt to at all weaken the council's authority, and that would obviously need to go through the charter and the voters. I think it's a front door attempt to improve the way that we budget, and in fact come up with better services for our residents, and to engage not only you but them in a more robust conversation about where their tax dollars are going and what they're buying in exchange. The $100,000 isn't to go out and hire consultants to tell us what they're doing in Washington State. It is to work with our in-house team with support to build out the systems that we need in order to make this better moving forward. I firmly believe that everything that we're investing in as we move forward, even if the decision is we don't want to move forward with two-year budgeting, the improvements to our structure in the way that we're able to report data, account data, follow with budgeting, I think even if we made no changes to the annual cycle, the conversation around getting a better handle on how programs are budgeted and what they're getting in return would have great value for you, for an executive, and for the public moving forward.
All right, Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Director Madaleno, and thank you, Jennifer. Good to see you. I would agree. I think many of us have expressed interest. I know I did on the campaign trail, and some of my other colleagues, in looking at a two-year budgeting cycle and seeing there's obviously various pros and cons to it. A big pro being an opportunity to set an agenda and kind of drive towards it and get some feedback in the interim. And obviously, like Seattle and they do in Washington State, you can, of course, make adjustments in the mid-year, kind of like we do with the CIP, and you know. So I'm interested in that. I would agree that this is a big decision, right? And so we need to kick all the tires and figure out the legal ramifications and have a robust discussion about it. Obviously, the council has the authority to set the final budget, so that's important. I did have a question, either from, I don't know who this is to, it might be to the committee or to you, Mr. Madaleno. Did we hear back from the county attorney on the charter amendment, whether that's would be required?
I'll be the first to say I've had informal conversations with the county attorney about the two-year cycle. In talking to him, my recollection is he said to me that there was no charter amendment required when you went to a two-year CIP, that these were adopted fiscal policies. You will still, just like on the CIP, there is an annual appropriation. You all vote in an annual appropriation. We've made up a decision. We've made up our minds that we're sort of going to take the every other year approach of what's before you and how you, and the amount of time you spend on the CIP. I think it would be the same thing. You will still, every county council will still make an annual appropriation. We would just be having a conversation about around the rules of how both the executive and the council handle the annual budget cycle. We've talked about how we could work with both the executive and with your committees to have different types of hearings, especially in the fall of the off year, to understand what are the results of the budget and have that more robust conversation that might be helpful for the entire community.
Well, that was going to be my second thing, and obviously this is tied intricately to the outcomes-based focus that you all are going to try to implement. They go hand in hand, and I think there's also at least desire on my part to, I think, and many others, to move in that direction too. But again, the details are important of what that process looks like, how we want to make sure we're providing the input that people elected us to provide, and in the direction. So I would say also to Ms. Michelson and to the Council President, thank you for your leadership this summer. I'm assuming this will be one of the things we dig into, and I would hope that we have our own process, and it is a joint process to get all this information. I'm certainly in favor of giving you some money to find out what it would take internally, and I think this is fine. I agree with the committee. But for the larger issue, it's a big issue. And having gone through this, or in the middle of this, or 3/4 maybe through the first budget, there's a lot of things I'm reflecting on. What is this process? How is it? What else could we be doing? And I think many of us are thinking that way. So it's a good time to have the conversation. But we want to have all the information. So I appreciate the proposal. Just please, continue to work with us, and I know the Council President I feel very good with her leadership on this, so thank you.
I really hope you're 95% of the way done the budget process and not 3/4 of the way.
Phew.
Yeah.
And also the OLO work plan we'll be looking at in July, but I think we also have added some resources for consulting. So as once we're done with the budget, then Ms. Michelson obviously will be taking a very important leadership role, because this is sort of a council-wide effort, but we may want to tap into some of those additional consulting dollars that we also have in case OLO doesn't have that necessary expertise. But it would be important to align to make sure that we are, working on something like that. This is a big deal. This is not something that, we're going to be able to do in just a couple of months or anything like that.
And if I may,
Yes.
Madam President, the Chief Administrative Officer has made it very clear during senior management team meetings that across the board, the county departments are to engage OLO, are to work with them on the studies, are actually to prepare suggestions for topics to be discussed for you to determine, because I think he sees it as a robust partnership in a way to improve county departments and services, and to have that fresh perspective from the outside, and to go out and look at the prior OLO reports and see what's out there for us to inform all county department heads and employees as to how we can provide better services. So I think there is a feeling of camaraderie. I'm trying to think of the right partnership in order to try to get this work done.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. So I've had the opportunity to see how the sausage is made on the executive side of the aisle. Now I've had an opportunity to see how it's made on the council side of the aisle. And I can tell you the challenges that the executive branch have are the same as the challenges as on the council. It's just an overwhelming process with a very finite amount of time. And you have incredible budget analysts, both on the council and the executive branch, that have portfolios that are completely unreasonable. And so it's hard enough to dig in, particularly for the larger departments within their own budgets, but to be able to see how they connect to other departments, let alone other agencies, is a real challenge. And I believe we are missing the opportunity for enhanced efficiencies. And as a former department head, I can tell you that it's very hard to not just roll over the budget. And a dirty little secret over the last 10 years is many of those 1,600 or so positions that we lost in county government were central administrative support positions. And so we do our best as a county to evaluate and track programs and services, but the practical reality is we don't have the staff support to be able to do it in a very comprehensive way. And again, connect it to work within other agencies and other departments. So I think the juice is absolutely worth the squeeze to fully explore this, because if we can do it well and we can do it right, then it will make us a more efficient and accountable government to our residents. I have no doubt about that. But the devil, of course, is in fact in the details. But this is a heavy lift, there's no question, and so I do think that it's worth appropriating resources to fully evaluate this and do it the right way. One of the hardest aspects of this isn't just figuring out the mechanism of it, but when to roll it in. And that won't happen within just one term within this administration. We're going to have to take a long view on this, but I do think it needs to also correspond to the CIP. I think that would be my preference. And I'd also add that as we look at contracts for nonprofit organizations, having them be on a biannual cycle so that their contracts can occur every 2 years as opposed to every one would be another really beneficial byproduct, I think, to this work, and really lead to some positive things. So I, for one, am excited about this effort and look forward to rolling up my sleeves and supporting it in any way we can.
On our very long to-do list following the budget cycle, obviously looking at how we handle all the grants is one that I know is on the top of everyone's list, and trying to move forward, in fact, of how we do it in a way that we don't disable or disadvantage groups that are trying to do summer programs, because we are arranging around a fiscal year. And how can we just do things better from a grant standpoint? And that's on the list. I have been trying to work through in my head in our conversations, and I would love to have all of your advice on this, and trying to figure out which cycle, which every other year do you want to be on? The CIP is timed so that a new executive and a new council get it in the off year. So because you're sworn in early December, these decisions have to be made. I mean, the capital budget has to be in on January 15th. It's a very small window. March 15th is a longer window, but still, there are a tremendous amount of decisions to be made in that very short period of time. It seems to make sense to me that we align everything on that same 2-year cycle, so that you're not having to make snap decisions. There's a consequence to that. Think through to yourself. Would you rather have them on alternating years? There are different ways to organize this. It does seem from a political standpoint, having it be on the same cycle as the CIP makes the good sense, because otherwise you'd be putting together a whole fresh 2-year budget, potentially in the last year of an administration and the last year of a council with many.
Yeah, I think. Right. I think that these are the type of things that obviously need to be.
Are you suggesting after 12 years in the Senate, I talk too much?
And all that kind of stuff. I just want to make sure that, that we get you the money that you need in order to get to that point.
I'm sorry about the filibuster.
No, that's quite all right. No, it's right before lunch, so we don't appreciate filibusters at this time. Councilmember Friedson.
I thought I had 2 years to talk. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam President and Madam Chair. In this case, I appreciate the summary that you provided, which I think did provide a pretty good description of the conversation that we had in committee, which I think was a good conversation that's continued here. I think today's conversation, as you have heard, that is diving a little bit into the details, I think reflects the fact that we haven't really fully baked this idea and figured out what we're going to do. And I think that is really what this is about for me. It's not about the policy, it's about the process. And I actually think that there's a lot to the 2-year budget cycle that has merit. And I think, as you know, I have tremendous amount of respect for you, Mr. Madaleno. I have tremendous amount of respect for Mr. Klein and both of your backgrounds in budgeting and figuring out how we work through this, I think is important. But, to me, this is just one modest, relatively modest investment, but it is competing against other dollars for other priorities, many of which we heard today and how important they are, and a lot of those won't be able to be funded in this budget, so we have to make some choices. And my understanding, as you've described it, is this is for infrastructure, basically. This is for the technological support and consulting to figure out what this might look like. But to give an infrastructure reference, to me, this is like laying the tracks for a train when we haven't decided where it's going yet. And to me, that is just not the way that the process should work. And, I do appreciate the fact that you talked about the robust discussions that are happening internally within the administration. But my frustration, and I think the frustration that has been expressed on this dais by others in other contexts, is that none of those conversations to a significant extent have happened on this side of the street, where we have the primary authority over budgeting. And so that, to me, is the challenge here of how I see this, from a process standpoint. And the second piece of it is the timing standpoint. I am, as I expressed previously and as is reflected in the packet from our discussion, skeptical of the idea that we could, before this current budget process happens, which I recognize is part of the reason why there's an interest in doing this, but to put in place these technological infrastructure changes to be able to implement a 2-year budget before, we're already down the path of this current budget for FY 21 and 22. And so my view is we should take a year, have those thoughtful discussions, figure out what this is going to look like, work together in collaboration. You can share the views of OMB and of the administration, along with Mr. Klein and the county executive, and we could work this out, and we could figure it out. We could find out how much it's going to cost in total, and how the process is going to work, and what the cycle is going to look like, and when we implement it, and how we implement it, and what benefits it's going to provide. And we could have that discussion not just for the benefit of those of us who are sitting on this dais, but more importantly for the folks who we're here representing in the public, where we haven't had a conversation with them about how this is going to work and how we believe, or you believe, or we all believe that it's going to benefit them. And that really is the basis of my concern. It's the reason why I don't support the $100,000 in this current appropriation, again, having nothing to do with my decision or viewpoint on 2-year budgeting and whether or not that would be a worthwhile endeavor. I certainly see the benefits that it could provide, depending on how we do it and how we implement it. I just think that we are not in the process right now where it is a fully baked proposal with the level of transparency and accountability and public input and even input from those of us who are here representing the public to be able to make that decision. But I appreciate the interest, I appreciate the initiative, and I look forward to working together, whatever we decide on this particular 100,000 of, really enhancing those conversations to make sure that we do have them and that we figure out what's the best way to move forward together.
And I would just say again, all the improvements that we're going to do, everything that we're going to work with this money, and anything that we do is with a mind towards improving the system we have. So even if 2-year budgeting doesn't happen, it doesn't mean that our computer system and the way that we track things can't be improved, especially on the personnel side, to give you all and give the public better data and more real time. So it's not like we're laying new tracks, we're improving the system that we're running, even if we wind up with a different service delivery model.
Thank you.
Boy, I'm
Councilmember
trying
Rice.
with analogies here.
Okay. Councilmember Rice.
What you just said at the end is actually incredibly helpful, Mr. Madaleno. And let me just say, I've publicly not been a fan of 2-year budgeting because as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, every single year, maintenance of effort, every single year, new initiatives that come out from Annapolis as well as from here. It really doesn't make a lot of sense. I've talked in great extensive detail with Mr. Klein about what it is and his vision, and I just don't buy it for what I'm in, and that is fine. I mean, it's whatever the case may be. When it's regarding this $100,000, I appreciate what you said at the end. Making a system better and capable of doing 2-year budgeting is a different story from just making a system be able to do 2-year budgeting. And so if the latter is what you're saying that this money's for, I'm much more comfortable in moving in that direction than in just making a system able to do 2-year budgeting, and that's all it does. So thank you very much for that clarification.
Thank you. Okay, so with that, we have a committee recommendation for the Office of Management and Budget. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Okay, and so that means that we have reached the end of our morning work, and we're going to come back at 1:30 to continue our operating budget discussion. Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Medellino, for being here. Are back to continue our FY20 operating budget and FY19 to 24 CIP amendments work session, starting with item 4, which is our Montgomery College item. And for that, I will invite all of you who are here. I see Dr. Pollard coming over. So Gloria Paricios is coming over. And Chairman Rice, I'll turn it over to you so that you can conduct this session for us.
Well, thank you very much, Madam President. And as the president of Montgomery College and her team are being seated, let me just start off by saying that we were completely unanimous in our support of Montgomery College, and what I think even greater, very appreciative of the college and all of the work it continues to do in our community to meet our constituency head on. Wherever they may be coming from in all of their different circumstances, whether they're exiting our Montgomery County Public Schools and seeking an appropriate way for them to continue their education, whether it be focused on financial or whether it be focused on certain curriculum and career pathways that you offer. There are so many folks who enter into Montgomery College from all different sorts of pathways of life that you continue to serve. And that is incredibly important to us, and the reason why we decided as an education committee, an education and culture committee, to make sure that we would fully support the Montgomery College budget. I think, again, and the county executive has heard me weigh in terms of why I feel that this is important. It's very interesting. And I made a couple of comments before in our EC meeting about while we've seen some of the decline in terms of the total number of students that you have, folks always want to forget about folks taking non-credit courses and thinking that somehow those still aren't students that are at your institution, and somehow that those classes that they take don't matter and aren't important. They truly are. And are a true core function of why you're here in our community and why when I talk about service, you are providing a service for our constituency. And folks just want to laser focus on those kinds of things without understanding the greater good. There are plenty of us, it was interesting. I was talking with my daughter about this the other day as we were arguing about something. And I said, your father learns every day. And it's incredibly important to learn something every day. In fact, it was noted at a function that you and I were both at about some of the world leaders and most successful people and how they read and commit themselves to reading every single day so that they can expand their knowledge. And these are folks like Warren Buffett and Mark Zuckerberg and Oprah Winfrey, all people who I would argue with you are very highly successful. And the reason why they read is because they want to attain more knowledge. And so it's not about going to school to get another degree. It's about getting that knowledge. And that knowledge can happen from all kinds of courses that you take at Montgomery College that are beyond the credit-bearing classes. And so I just wanted to highlight that because, again, I think that as we start to look at the efficacy of Montgomery College as a whole, that we start looking at that from a deeper dive in terms of analyzing who the people are and what they're taking and why they're taking them. And I think we'll have a very interesting narrative to be able to continue to tell. So I look forward to working with the college on that. But let me just say, now that I've had this very long introduction, that we had a unanimous reduction to approve the budgets requested by the college and recommended by the executive for the non-tax supported funds, including the executive's technical adjustments to reduce the cable TV fund by $12,000. We also approved the college's technical adjustment to increase the non-tax supported federal, state, and private grant fund expenditure by $1.245 million. And then last, but certainly not least, and the most important, we placed $3,065,969 on the reconciliation list to support the college's requested county contribution. I feel it is a narrative that is incredible in terms of that we know the great work that goes on, that your faculty and staff put forth every single day. You know, when you talk about the value of a teacher, also at that event, when we heard an executive from Amazon giving a presentation about how a teacher changed her life as a young foster child, one of 6, whose mother died from a drug overdose and was separated from her siblings, and it was a teacher who pulled her aside and made sure that she understood that she could be someone, and is now a corporate executive with one of the largest companies in the world, Amazon, says something. It says something about the power of education. It says something about the power of mentorship. It says something about all of the things that we know how important education is to being a game changer in people's lives. And that's why Montgomery College and MCPS and USG are so important in our community. They are game changers, they are life changers, and that's the reason why we felt that we needed to fully support your budget. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Pollard, if you wanted to make any opening remarks, and then I'll turn it over to Mr. Howard to kind of maybe walk us through if we need to go into any greater detail in any particulars. Dr. Pollard.
Well, thank you, Councilmember Rice, and certainly President Navarro, for the opportunity to be here today. What I thought I might do is just defer for a moment, if you don't mind, to my board, I would say board chair, soon-to-be board chair, our first vice chair, Gloria Aparicio Blackwell, who wanted to offer a couple comments, and then whatever she doesn't say, I'll follow up.
Thank you very much for the moment to speak with all of you. I'm so appreciative of all the support. When you mentioned about the non-credits, I was one of them. When I came to Montgomery County and to the United States, I came to study English. And because of your investment on this, and now look at me. I'm not saying that I'm the example, but I'm one of the example of what it is investing in education. So I wanted to thank you, and I know all my fellow board members are really looking into the affordability and the fiscal sustainability, how critical and important, not even yesterday, not even today, more than ever tomorrow. So we want you to consider us as to be economic engine. And we thank you all of you. Nancy, thank you, my compatriota, amiga. So thank you to all of you, Gabe, and all of you that I know a lot. So I wanted just to thank my gratitude for all this. And I know Dr. Paula will give you all the technical information because I'm here just be a champion. Thank you.
So briefly, I will join that. We have been very fortunate, and because of the council and the support that you all have offered, the ability for us to advance an equity agenda in Montgomery County, to provide access to higher education, to ensure that workforce development is something that thrives in our community, and very clearly making sure that we have facilities that rise up to meet the phenomenal teaching that our faculty do. I am struck this week is probably one of the most sacred times at a college campus. And we are in the midst of finals week, which sends students over the edge, but we are also, and our faculty as they try to get those grades done. But on Friday, we get to celebrate. It is the milestone. It is the manifestation of our mission. And we will have nearly 3,000 students graduating from Montgomery College in certificates and degrees on Friday. Over 1,000 of them are walking across the stage. And the idea for us to be able to say our students who came to us through apprenticeship programs, those who are in short-term certificates, those who are planning to transfer, and those who are graduating and going directly into work, I know on behalf of them and the faculty and staff we serve, we owe you a thank you for the support that has happened there. Our budget this year that we submitted, we believe, the board challenged me, Darian, we want a budget that is fiscally sustainable. You need to go back and have very thoughtful conversations internally. We want you to submit a budget that is responsive to the context in which the county is operating right now, and we also expect you not to compromise on excellence. So when we talk about achievement gaps and opportunity gaps, the ones that we see in the K-12 space, they don't stop when those students complete 12th grade. They come to Montgomery College. And while we have certainly seen an enrollment contraction, as I tell people, all you have to do is look at what the national literature says on this. This is a phenomenon that's happening in every college across the country, yet no one talks about the complexity of the students' lives who are coming to us, their needs and expectations, and more importantly, how we have to provide more support services to wrap around those students and make sure that they are supported while they're there. And to say that our employees have done their work as well. We went to them and we said, this is what we can reasonably do, and the board was very thoughtful and listened, and not only have we put in place a new compensation model for the entire organization, but we also negotiated contracts that allow us to be fiscally responsible, but also to be very thoughtful about how we create a sustainable future for the organization and for employees to understand what their life cycle could be. So I sit before you as someone who knows, unfortunately, that you all have to make some very difficult decisions over the next several days, but I also know that you've been a tremendous supporter of Montgomery College, probably more so than anyone. You understand our students and the mission that we have, and I'm certainly really happy to respond to any questions you have as we move along. And certainly want to thank Craig for the work that he does, Mr. Howard, for the work that he does in making sure that he puts us through our paces, asks thoughtful questions, but also treats us with respect. And that's something that I wanted to say. So thank you very much, Mr. Howard.
Before we get to the details, I do want to thank you for the invitation to speak at the equity conference that you had, the summit. It was so inspiring to see all the faculty and everybody so focused on this issue. But what you were just saying about what time, this time of the year, it really is the time where you get to see the promise of Montgomery College personified. I was so honored to have been invited to be the keynote speaker for universities at Shady Grove commencement. And the young woman that introduced me, Juanita Benavides Alcalá, actually is a graduate of MCPS, so she graduated from Gaithersburg High School, then went to Montgomery College, was able to get a scholarship, graduated from universities at Shady Grove in education, and already has a job at Summit Hall Elementary School. And just to hear her story and to understand the pivotal role that Montgomery College played in her journey, first one in her family, first generation, was just so extraordinarily, inspirational. And then for me personally, attended the graduation, of course, of my youngest daughter. I'm done with college graduates, but it really is a moment to reflect. And as I'm sitting there at Howard University campus, just really taking in the celebration of a culmination of so many years of so much work. And, my family has been fortunate that we've been able to support our daughters in their journey. But for so many students, like the ones that you serve, it is not so easy. And and everybody comes to Montgomery College from different perspectives. As Gloria was saying, so many people we know, including, my own siblings, have gone through Montgomery College as well. And so this is just such an extraordinary investment, and all it takes is to really participate in some of these graduations, to just take it all in and understand that this is why this is so incredibly important. So I'm just super thrilled that it's just so good to be able to say, yes, we support the college, we support universities at Shady Grove, we support these opportunities, and to see the tangible gain and results, it makes it all worthwhile. So again, thank you, and thank you to the Board of Trustees for all that work and for making the dreams of so many young people, a reality, and so many young adults a reality. All right, so I think turn it over to Mr. Howard, and then we do have some lights and some questions.
Yep. Mr. Howard, if you could just walk through some of our salient points, and then I know that some of my colleagues have comments or questions. So.
Yep, not a problem. On the first page of the cover memo, I have a table showing the college's request compared to the county executive's recommendation for FY20. The executive's recommendation was $3.1 million below in the county contribution and the tax-supported current fund. The total budget number is $4.3 million because that includes the technical adjustment for the grants of $1.2 million that Mr. Rice mentioned. On the second page of the cover sheet, I highlight some of the key issues that the committee discussed. Some of these have already been talked about this morning, but I'll just mention a couple other ones. The college's budget does assume a tuition increase of 3.1% for students in FY20, which is the same, in terms of the dollar increase, was the same dollar increase that was done last year. It was approved by the board. We talked a lot about the enrollment, local funding, and affordability, as the chair and also the college president have mentioned already. In terms of compensation and benefits, the college's FY20 request includes an increase of $6.7 million for employee compensation and benefit adjustments. As the council has talked quite a bit about compensation sustainability over the past few weeks, I did want to point out that the college recommendations for this year and the past 2 years have been lower than some of the other county agencies. And this is in part due to their compensation model that they adopted beginning in January 2018. And then we also went through some of the programmatic and service changes in the college's budget. It is primarily a same services level budget this year. There's just under $500,000 in program enhancements, and I listed what those enhancements are on the bottom of that page. But the college also had $5.1 million in reductions that they assumed as part of their process, which is why the increase, the requested increase, is a little bit lower. So those are some of the highlights that the committee discussed.
So, Mr. Harbour, before we turn it over to some of my colleagues, I did want to highlight this because it's incredibly important, especially since we will be talking with Montgomery County Public Schools shortly about some of the expansion efforts that you've made when it comes to addressing, as you had mentioned, Dr. Pollard, the equity, opportunity, achievement gap that we see within our schools. I mean, really, when it comes to expanding the opportunities for dual enrollment so that folks can actually graduate with both an associate's degree as well as a high school diploma is incredible. If you want to talk about cost savings and what that means for a young person, and you know, Council President Navarro knows it all too well as a person who doesn't have to write those checks any longer to Howard University, it's quite expensive. And as a person who's got a daughter looking at colleges right now and touring colleges, college is incredibly expensive, and I keep trying to ask my daughter why she won't consider going to Montgomery College for her first 2 years. But nonetheless, it's one in which these things are game changers. You know, when I talked before just very flowery language about what's happening, these are the nitty-gritty details. These are the nuts and bolts of what are happening that are making differences in our community. You are making college affordable for people. By doing programs like this, partnering with MCPS, you are making a college degree affordable again for folks who didn't have that opportunity before. That's a very big deal. When I look at what's happening with a lot of your scholarships and increasing financial aid counselors so that folks can get linked up with more folks who are providing scholarships for folks. There are lots of scholarships out there for all you parents out there. Tons of scholarships that are out there that go unutilized every single year. And so having a great financial aid counselor to be able to help you to navigate, to understand, especially a person who may be coming to this country for the first time and not understand the process, and making sure that they understand the benefits that are out there for folks is incredibly important. And so from that perspective, we really are being very culturally competent about what it is that we're doing as well, understanding that many of our people of color are oftentimes more impacted socioeconomically, and so therefore have less of an ability to pay for college. And so from that perspective, we are addressing it from an equity lens, which is absolutely incredible. And last but not least, just to understand, and this I think was the most frustrating part for me, that made it hard for me to swallow when it came to the reductions that were sent over by the county executive. You had already gone and done your scrubbing. You had a budget that had sustainable contracts in it. You didn't have to go back like we had to and say, wait a minute, we want something that's a little bit more sustainable. You negotiated it and made it happen. But then on top of that, also put forth other reductions as a part of your budget as well. It wasn't as if you came and said, look, you know, we're great, we're Montgomery College, you should fund us, which would have been true. But you took it a step further and said, no, look, we want to be partners. We want to figure out ways in which we can work together, which you've always done. And that's the part that frustrated me the most about it, is that you didn't come the first way, which I still would have understood and appreciated. You actually came the second way.
and said, I'm going to do this. I'm going to incorporate a tuition increase, knowing that that still means that it's going to affect our students who still oftentimes can't afford it, but made those kinds of decisions. Those are things that are not lost on me as chair of the EC committee, and I know are not lost on all of my colleagues sitting here on the dais, as well as folks in the community. I've heard from folks in the community who don't have children and who go to Montgomery College and who don't go to Montgomery College themselves, who have sang your accolades, and I want you to know that they are true supporters of your institution as well. So apparently, a lot of people are seeing the great work that's going on there and what you continue to do each and every day. So kudos to all of you for your great work in that effort. And now, Madam President, I'll turn it over to you to turn to my colleagues.
Whoops. Councilmember Feetson.
Thank you to the Council President for your comments and leadership, and also to Councilmember Rice for really leading the effort on this and on what is the most indispensable investments that we make, which is in our education system. And I don't think that we can talk about our education system without talking about the college. And when we talk about fully funding the education system, that has to include the college, and I really appreciate you really leading the effort, Councilmember Rice, as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, and also just as a longstanding leader who understands and lives the importance of education to make sure that we make that case. And Dr. Pollard, it's always great to be with you, and I feel like I don't need my coffee with you. I know you're more of a tea drinker than a coffee drinker, and I feel like that's because every time with you I get like an extra ounce of energy. Just being around you, and really appreciate your visionary leadership, not just of one of the most important institutions that we have in the county, but really your broader community leadership and what you bring to the community that we all share. And I just really appreciate that, and thank you for it, because I think your role in our community here, your role in our county here is much more than just leading a really important organization. As critical as it is to everything that we do. And we can't talk about equity, we can't talk about economic opportunity, we can't talk about workforce development unless we're talking about the college as a central part of that conversation. And as we have these conversations of cradle to career, one of the key pieces of that is a world-class college that's serving the community and making sure that everybody in the community can appreciate it. And I can't speak as a parent of college age students like my colleagues have, but I can speak from a different but very similar perspective, having been involved serving on the board of and running the 529 College Savings Program in the state, of just how expensive college is, how difficult it is for so many families to access, the fact that we have $6 billion, over $6 billion in savings for families, and it's not nearly enough to be able to come close to affording what it now costs to access the education pipeline that's required of today's modern economy. And it is so clear how critical our colleges are to allowing families, as Councilmember Rice noted, to be able to access the opportunities that the economy has. And so it is just such an important aspect, and I am just so appreciative of it. And I really do think that the college serves as the tie that binds the economy to the education system, and vice versa, the education system to the economy. And just appreciate the understanding that you have of that role and of that obligation and of that responsibility to our residents. And I appreciate the fact that I think as a council, this current one and prior ones have really understood that and appreciated that, and have funded it accordingly, reflecting what role that it plays in all of the different efforts that we are discussing. I really appreciate your commitment to fiscal responsibility and long-term sustainability. I think we need more of it. I look to you as a real leader across the county in that effort of how we do that, how we balance these really challenging competing interests. There are no easy choices when it comes to fiscal responsibility. There are no easy decisions when it comes to long-term sustainability, but we can't be serious about the priorities that we have unless we are serious about prioritizing. And you've really done I think yeoman's work and along with your board, along with your team to make sure you were part of that. I share Councilmember Rice's frustration with the fact that this is on the reconciliation list. I don't think it should have been, but I am strongly supportive of it. I appreciate the fact that the Education and Culture Committee had made that such a strong advocacy effort and decision point, put it all on in whole. And in order to make you whole, we have to make that request whole and not break it up. And I am just a big believer in it. I'm a big believer in you, and I'm a big believer in the college, and just wanted to take the opportunity to thank you for all of your hard work and look forward to continuing our partnership to serve the community in a way that is critically important to solving every one of our other challenges, from connecting our workforce to our jobs, connecting our economy to the modern world, and ensuring that everybody has an opportunity to be part of it.
Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you, Madam President. Do want to echo the thank yous for the Education and Culture Committee and your leadership, Chairman Rice, in shepherding this through. I saw with great interest your guys' committee sessions on this specific issue, because Montgomery College is very near and dear to my heart. As some of you know, my mom and dad were students at Montgomery College, and my dad played on MC's first soccer team. So I literally would not be here if it weren't for Montgomery College. So I do want to just acknowledge the great work. So one of my favorite meetings that I've had in the last month was a group of Montgomery College students, about 8 of them, as part of a public policy course, came to meet with all of us. And it was just really powerful to see not just the academic support and rigor that they were experiencing within the college, but how the college really uniquely addressed their social and emotional needs. We often talk about the social and emotional needs of our students in MCPS, but the sad fact is just getting to college is half the battle, literally, because so many students drop out, and so many students of color drop out because they just don't have the support and infrastructure that they need to succeed. And so that is a story that I know we tell, but through the lens of the students that came and went with me, really highlighted and underscored the value that brings. So this was an easy one for me to support through the reconciliation process, and I do want to express my appreciation for being such great team players further upstream in the budget process. That kind of administrative leadership should really be rewarded and should serve as a model for other sister county agencies moving forward. And so I just want to be on the record of acknowledging that it took hard work to get where you were, and why it made it even easier for us to support this particular reconciliation list item, at least certainly within our office. And the last thing I'll mention for now is highlighting something that Councilmember Friedson just said, and that is within the workforce development space. So moving forward, I think there's an opportunity for us to be more intentional in connecting the college's already great work within workforce development and readying our next generation of employees in Montgomery County. But that's another area, not in this budget, but not too far in the distant future, that I'd like to open up a conversation about as well. And I know my colleagues on the Education and Culture Committee are especially interested in this topic, as are my colleagues in the Fed Committee. So I do think there will be an opportunity for us to have more robust conversations around that effort, but keep up the phenomenally great work, and proud to support this particular item.
Councilmember Jawando.
Thank you, Council President, and thank you, Dr. Pollard and board and staff and everybody else, and Craig, Staff Member Craig, and Craig, Council Member Craig. Thank you both for your work. I'll pick up where Council Member Albornoz left off, and I have the honor and distinction to be the one council member on both the Fed Committee and the Education Committee, which is at the intersection of workforce development and our economy and economic development, and the pipeline issues that Councilmember Friedson and others have talked about. And so I've kind of designated myself a lead that doesn't exist to work on those issues. And but I couldn't agree more with Councilmember Albornoz. We've had some really in-depth and popcorn watching sessions here about this topic. And you all play a big role, but we're going to need you to play even a bigger role. And I know you stand ready for the challenge, and so we're excited to talk more about that. And I just wanted to say that my favorite committee, it was a hard choice, but it's the Education and Culture Committee. We've got a great group. And
say it again.
Okay, well, you heard it. And
Wait. Who had the hard assignment of trying to select members for certain committees? Okay, all right.
That's right. And I actually, you had to convince me a little bit on one of them. So I appreciate it. Good leadership. But no, I just will say it was a 3-0. It took about 2 seconds for us to put it on, all $3.1 million. And it was a no-brainer. And I too want to say, because I think it's important, I was very disappointed that we didn't get that request fully funded. I mean, here's what and I met you in a previous life when I was working on community college issues for President Obama, when we were rewarding and highlighting you as one of the best community colleges in the nation. And this is 10 years ago, or 6, 7, 8, whatever it was now, too long. And then I met you again when I was at Discovery Communications, when you were receiving an award for being one of the best community college programs in the nation. And I don't understand why we won't, and we've had this in a couple other areas, invest in the things that are proven and are working and are helping our students. And so I hope we're not here next year, along with the point that you were tight with your fiscal budget, and you brought us a lean budget, much leaner than many other agencies. And the fact that we would get a $3.1 million reduction over from the county executive, the lowest recommended allocation in 7 years for an institution that's one of the best in the nation, and I've seen all of them, Eduardo Padrón at Miami-Dade, there's a lot, I've been with them all, and we are at the top of that list. And so it doesn't make sense to me. And so I just send a message across the street, I don't want to see this next year. You all are doing too good of work and too important work for us to be playing this game on the reconciliation list. So we should be rewarding success, we should be investing in innovation and inclusion, and we should be rewarding good behavior. So please, I know we talked about this a little bit, when you bring the contract back next year, realize you have partners here, so hopefully we get the right thing initially, but don't try to puff it up, and you want to continue being the model, because we're going to do our job here on the council. You're going to see that, I think, this time around with your request being fully funded. So thank you for all the work that you're doing. We can't wait to partner with you on even more going forward.
Hear, hear. All right, so I don't see any other lights. And so with that, we have before us a recommendation from the Education and Culture Committee for Montgomery College FY20 operating budget. So all those in favor, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you very much. Okay, now we're on to a next item that is also related to Montgomery College. And this is capital CIP. And for this, I will turn it over to Councilmember Rice again.
This is actually my afternoon, so those of you get used to hearing my voice. It's going to be a lot of this. This one should be a little bit quicker. This is our capital improvements program relating to Montgomery College, and again, want to thank the college for understanding that unfortunately we don't have all the resources that we'd like to be able to have to support all of the worthy projects that continue to go on, especially when it comes to meeting the needs of being a leader in technology, when it leads to being a leader in terms of the resources that need to be there to support our students, whether it's library spaces, whether it's other kinds of facilities that need to be top-notch really in this 21st century that we see that is a globally competitive marketplace. And so from that perspective, we understand that we wish we could do more. We see this all throughout our county assets as a whole, but we certainly want to continue to work with you in terms of really approaching things from a different perspective. I appreciate you understanding with our libraries, of which Councilmember Jawando is lead, in terms of the new direction that we're heading in with our library spaces and looking more at refreshes instead of tear downs and how we can work together. So again, I appreciate the partnership. It's one in which when I have a conversation with you, Dr. Pollard, about these things, it's not as though there's resistance. It's I understand and let us know how we can work together to make these things happen. And I really, truly appreciate that. So, Mr. Howard, we can just walk through these very quickly, but whether it's the College Library Renovations Project or PLAR, the Planning, Design, and Construction, or the Information Technology, we voted to approve them all. It was unanimous by the Education and Culture Committee 3-0, as it was with our previous decisions.
Yeah, the only point I'll make is that the executive's recommendation for the CIP was about $26 million below the college's request. The majority of that was made up with the executive working with the college to figure out a plan to change some projects and make some reductions, and the committee accepted all of those changes. And then there was $9.25 million left in an affordability reconciliation PDF, and the committee's recommendations meet that reduction target via reductions in the planning life cycle asset replacement project that were suggested by the college, with a couple of changes that the committee made, as well as a $1.5 million reduction in the information technology project for current revenue.
And so, Madam President, that's what's before you.
All right. Don't see any lights. So all those in favor of adopting the CIP budget and amendments, please raise your hand. That is unanimous. Thank you. All right. Thank you so much, Montgomery College. And so moving right along in education, item 6 is Montgomery County Public Schools.
So thank you very much, Madam President. I know folks thought I was joking, but I was actually serious. This is our Education and Culture evening, so welcome. I will not be auctioning off anything tonight, though. Well, yeah, I am, I guess. As we're joined by Shebra Evans, who's our president of the Board of Education, Dr. Jack Smith, our superintendent of schools, Nikki Diamond, our chief financial officer, and of course, Bruce Meyer, who's with our Office of Management and Budget. I want to thank you all. Again, I'll make the same comments because they apply to both. Education is incredibly important, and having partnerships is incredibly important as well in being able to adjust and act nimbly within a huge system of over 160,000 kids about how best to serve them now to make sure they are going to be able to address the concerns that this globe has in the future. I also see that we have Vice President of the Board of Education, Pat O'Neill, with us, so thank you very much, Pat, for being here. This is incredibly important because, again, it starts with our very young children and giving them all they need to be able to then be successful. And oftentimes I think when we take Montgomery College first and then MCPS, we're kind of out of order. But it is one in terms of talking about what you can achieve and attain if we invest in the beginning. And oftentimes, unfortunately, Montgomery College ends up being an intervener in terms of where things may not have gone the way we wanted them to. But it also serves as a way in which we can continue to build on the great things that are happening within our schools as well. It's a great thing because, you know, in the multiple meetings that we've had, Dr. Smith, from a budget perspective where we've gone out on our budget forums, you've alluded to the fact and acknowledged that MCPS is not perfect, nor am I, nor are we. And so from that perspective, there will always be things that we can continue to do better. And you've been very open and honest and frank about those and took them head on. Things that are in the spotlight, in the news media, as well as things that folks don't even talk about that matter so much on a daily basis. It runs the gamut. And I really just want to applaud you because I still remember and I still have it. I mention it all the time. When I first had the opportunity to sit down with you and you were then candidate for superintendent of Montgomery County Public Schools. And I really want to thank the board and leadership for allowing me that opportunity to sit down and discuss with you what you thought about what the future of this system would be. And sir, I can only tell you that I look at that list from time to time and I look at it and every single thing that you promised me that day that was important to you have been things that you have continued to fight for within Montgomery County Public Schools. And I just want to publicly thank you for that because they were important to me, because they were important to our community when it comes to how we make our school system an even better place for all of those kids. And you've done that. We've seen the results, which is why, again, just as the conversation was with Montgomery College, that it became frustrating that at the beginning of this budget cycle, we did not have a fully funded Montgomery County Public Schools budget. I will say that I want to appreciate the work of our council president, who reached out to the county executive and worked with him to get us there. And so I thank the county executive for realizing the error of his ways and understanding how important this was for this county. We are making strides, and let me be very clear, we are making strides in addressing the equity, opportunity, achievement gap in our schools. I see it firsthand at Kingsview Middle and at Northwest High School. I see it with the friends of my daughters. I go to these schools all the time. I know kids who are doing better because of our investment in MCPS. And those are just two examples of the myriad of hundreds of examples that are out there in every single one of our schools about the great work that goes on. It's happening. Is it happening as quickly as we want it to be? And is it happening for as many children as we want it to be for? No. But part of that is through investment. I have to give you the resources to be able to push the programs that are going to address these issues. You know, and I just want to say one last thing. You will continue to get criticized, sir. And I know you're kind of used to it by now, but I just want to remind you, you will get criticized for saying MCPS doesn't do anything. Those are the people who don't bother to look. Those are the people who don't bother to show up at a school. Those are the people who don't bother to talk to a child. Those are the people who don't bother to go into a neighborhood. Those are the people who don't bother to ask the questions. Because if you did, you would see that we are doing the work within Montgomery County Public Schools. Those walls have some great things that are happening, and all you have to do is go into, like I did at Kennedy High School, and look on the wall and see the testimony of kids who thought that they would never amount to anything and talk about how they're going to college and what colleges they're going to. And oh, by the way, right by that billboard of those notes about where those children have been accepted to school, my home neighborhood, where there's a nursing program that's being able to give young people a chance to focus on career pathways right there in school so that they can be employed. People don't know about what's happening in our schools. But rest assured, the reason why we believe this investment is important is because that's the type of work that's happening all across this county. That's the reason why your investment is important. That's the reason why we should make sure that we fully fund your budget, because those are the things that are encompassed in it. And oh, by the way, just as we asked Montgomery College, you have also tried to trim down. You've leaned, you know, folks don't understand and want to acknowledge the fact that you cut positions from central office. I've seen it. I've heard it from some teachers who use those as resources, and it does matter too from that perspective. But you made decisions to try and make yourselves more lean. So you've done both as well. When partnership is there, when people have a focus on what that end game is and it's in line with what our community is, it's our responsibility to continue to support them. And so I was very happy, and I, you know, have to just give credit to my colleagues on the Education and Culture Committee, because they know all too well. They're heavily invested in education and know the importance and power of education as a whole. That story that I mentioned about the Amazon executive was one in which inspired her to become a teacher before she became an Amazon executive. And quite frankly, then she said, while she was inspired to be a teacher because a teacher had reached out to her and saved her life, she actually wasn't that good. She taught middle school. It's her words, not mine. And so she said, so I decided to do something else and become a corporate executive. No, you know, I'm not trying to disparage corporate executives. I'm just saying that she said it was easier for her to be a corporate executive than to be a middle school teacher. So we'll leave it at that. Dr. Smith, I'm going to turn it over to you, but just wanted to say again that I too, as Councilmember Jawando said about Montgomery College's budget, I hope we don't find ourselves in this situation again.
I mean, to have to be spinning our wheels over and over again, going back and forth, trying to identify this and that, really doesn't make sense when we know that we have a quality system that's doing the right thing, that's really pushing. And while, again, you're not perfect, you are doing everything you can to try and attain that 100% for every single one of our students. It is not without the will of you to try and get there. And so I really just want to thank you for you and your leadership in the board, for everything that it continues to do to partner. We've never had a stronger relationship between our Board of Education and the Montgomery County Council, and that's attributable to all of you continuing to work with us in partnership. So I really want to thank you, Ms. Evans, and your fellow board members for all the work that they've done as well. So I'll turn it over to you, Dr. Smith.
Thank you very much, Mr. Rice. I appreciate your depth of knowledge about the school system and that you can speak with specific evidence for the statements that you make. I will now turn to Ms. Evans and ask her to make the opening comments, and then I will make some.
Sure. I'll be brief. I have a cough going on. I don't want to have a coughing attack in front of you all, but just wanted to say thank you to Council President Navarro, and our county council members for allowing us just to be able to come here to just discuss the operating budget real briefly and to say thank you. The board requested the FY 2020 budget because it was a budget that we believe was necessary just to be able to provide funding for same level services for our students. You know, we have a growing student population that we want to be able to serve. We have rising costs. We have strategic accelerators that are around our key bodies of work. We talk about the opportunity gaps so very often, and we have work that we can have done here within this budget around closing those gaps, just around making certain that we're improving our academic excellence for all of our students. We want to continue to build on the foundation and the structure that we believe this budget will allow us to be able to do. When I think back to the press conference that we had on April 24th, which is really great to be able to have the support from you all as well as our county executive, just to be able to come together to say we are in agreement that our school system is a priority and that we want to make certain that you have the resources necessary to be able to educate the more than 163,000 students, right? That's a lot of students. And so we appreciate you all being able to come together with us on that day, standing to say that you support education here in Montgomery County Public Schools. The one thing that I also stated at the press conference is the one thing that we're waiting to hear on is the current commission. We want to know how that work that's going to supplement the plans that we have for our student is going to phase out, like come out, how that plan will look, as well as just be able to give us what we need to continue to do what we said that we were going to do for our community here in Montgomery County. But just knowing that having your support and your backing makes all the difference, that you really understand what is needed and what is required to be able to ensure that our system can continue to improve teaching and learning for our students. So I just wanted to thank you on behalf of my colleagues for your continued support.
Certainly it makes the job of the superintendent easier when you have a strong, committed school board and a strong, committed county government to the effort of educating every child. It does. It makes all the difference. And having had the chance to travel across the state of Maryland for 3 full years, I have seen the difference. And so I would start just by saying that is the single most positive thing that comes forward to the school system, is that combination of the school board, the county council, and the county executive's office working together on behalf of children. And now I have 3 years of sitting here in front of you, so I can say that with some trend data, not just as a one-time deal. I also will hearken back to 2 years ago when the first budget that the school board and I brought forward with me as superintendent, because of course you walk in on July 1 with a budget and you work with that budget during that year. But that budget we brought forward, and this body asked us to report regularly on what we were doing about closing and eliminating the access, opportunity, and learning disparities that exist. And we have done that, and we will continue to do that, because while looking at data and evidence does not change that data or evidence, it does help us think about what we need to do to change the circumstance for children. And really, we have 3 overarching goals in Montgomery County, and you hear them all the time, to maintain the high level of excellence that we have had for so long as a school system and a community. That's absolutely essential that we do that. To continue to see progress, and we do have many, many different points of evidence to show progress for children, for an equitable and bright future and opportunity. So excellence, equity, and then an undergirding of their well-being. Those are the things of the well-being of all children. And tomorrow at the board meeting, the board will see a digital platform and a framework around how we're going to be more systematic and methodical in the well-being of children. And that's we'll be sending that to you tomorrow, actually, while the board meeting's going on, so you can look at the materials. And this is a first step. Many, many, many years of work have been done in this area. But this is a first step to be more systematic, methodical, and to make sure we reach all 135 elementary schools and all 40 middle schools, all 25 high schools, and the other learning centers for which we are responsible. You know, the budget is a difficult issue because there are so many different opinions. There are probably about 1 million opinions in Montgomery County of what should happen with the budget for the students. And many, many of those views, perspectives, opinions are incorporated into what we put forward to you as a school system and as a Board of Education. And some people think that the school system should ask for much, much more funding each year. In fact, Mr. Lloyd, our association president, created a video that I would encourage you all to watch. I think it would be very instructive to you. I think we need the money we need to operate, and I think we have to have the money we need to operate to give very good results. It's always a two-pronged issue. It's never a single prong, money or results, but how do those things fit together, as Mr. Rice was saying just a few minutes ago. And it's certainly our goal to show results for children, both in their well-being and in their learning. And it's just critically important to do that. And I think the approach that the councils I've worked with has taken to incrementally work through this makes sense. I think President Navarro, you have just been tremendous this year in helping bring people together to think about what it is we need and to look at all of the different factors and work with Mr. Rice and the Education and Culture Committee and the entire board and the County Executive's Office. And for I appreciate their very real effort to fund our budget. There's a lot of conversation in their office around Kerwin, and we have our very first very small step in the Kerwin process in that commission. And it's part of what the solution is this year, as the County Executive's Office hoped it would be. But certainly in the coming years, we'll face many more challenges together, both with the Kerwin Commission efforts and as we look at 3 new employee contracts to negotiate in the coming months for FY 21, 22, and 23. But those are not insurmountable. Those are opportunities to come together, figure things out, work on them, and move forward on behalf of children and adolescents by marshaling all of the adults together in that effort to work on that behalf. So I cannot say how much I appreciate working with you. On any given day, we have all sorts of things that come all of our way. But the fact of the matter is, when we stay focused, we do better on behalf of schools and students, and that's the key. So thank you so much.
So I was just going to turn it over to Mr. Howard. I think we have about 5 salient points, but the county executive did originally have a budget that was $14.5 million below the Board of Education's request. In subsequent discussions and transmittals, the county executive sent over the $5 million adjustment for the 911 fund, but then there was also the additional funding from the state via Kerwin funding that actually was in line. And I really want to thank Mr. Howard for doing a deep dive analysis and working with MCPS, because in true fidelity and keeping true with what Kerwin wanted, what I didn't want is to have money that was supposed to be purposed for one thing that was being utilized for the school system to do something else. And so I really want to say thank you for you guys working together to identify what that was, and thank you, OMB, for continuing to work with us once we knew that that was the direction we were headed in, to ensure that we had a fully funded budget that still supported
all of the initiatives that were within the Kerwin recommendations that followed the Kerwin funding. So I really just want to say thank you for that, Dr. Smith.
If I could, I would just point out that until April 10th, no one really knew what was going to be in that legislation. And so there was a lot of work and back and forth in your office and in the county executive's office and working with the school system to really stay nimble and flexible. And I would also point out that we're just under $30 million in reductions in the last in this budget and the previous two. And we take that seriously, not because we want to cut things, but because we have to constantly be, I think Councilmember Friedson said this earlier, someone did, if you're going to prioritize, you have to prioritize. You can't just say everything is a priority. So I really heard that and appreciated that very much.
And so I think I just want to close by one last thing before I turn it over to Mr. Howard, which is acknowledging the great work of our state legislators who this year certainly made education a priority, seeing the funding coming from the Kerwin legislation as well as school construction, and we'll get into our CIP momentarily, but they certainly pushed the envelope and see a significant increase in both avenues of funding for our schools. And so really want to thank them for that leadership. And then, of course, we had already mentioned it before, but the blueprint when it comes to pre-K and having the down payment there as we continue to expand pre-K. And I was actually just talking with some folks on Saturday evening, one woman who owns her own pre-K facility, and she was giving me an earful about, she's from Fairfax, but she was giving me an earful about the structures and how best to ensure that from a public and private standpoint that we work well together. So I continue to look forward to working with you, Dr. Smith, and you, Ms. Evans, in terms of making sure that Montgomery County is well positioned to be able to really take our early childhood care and education to the next level. It's really a point where we now are well positioned based on the leadership that we have and the structure that we have in place. And so that's going to be a very big deal for us. And then, Mr. Howard, I know you're going to highlight some of the programmatic adjustments that we see that are as a part of this budget that reflect some of the reasons why we fought so hard for some of these increases. So I'll turn it over to you now to just give us some of the salient points.
So on the first page of the cover sheet for the staff report, the committee made 4 unanimous recommendations. The first is to approve FY20 tax-supported funding for MCPS, a local contribution and state aid, and the dollar amounts are shown in the table at the bottom of the first page. The second and third recommendations were to approve the executive's recommended non-tax supported funding for each of those funds. And then also the fourth recommendation was to approve the executive's proposed funding source shift in the technology modernization CIP project in FY19 and FY20 between current revenue and recordation tax. There's no change to the total funding level. And we take up the technology modernization project as part of the operating budget each year because it's primarily funded by current revenue. So in total, the committee recommended a budget for MCPS that's $30.5 million greater than was included in the executive's original recommendation. That comes from $24.4 million in additional state aid from Kerwin, as was mentioned, as well as an increase of $6.1 million in the county contribution. Overall, the committee's recommendation would put the MCPS budget at $8.6 million above the minimum maintenance of effort level. This is lower than the board's original request of $17 million and higher than the executive's March recommendation of $2.5 million. On the next couple pages, we highlight some of the key issues that the committee discussed. In terms of the county contribution, as the chair noted, and the council president and the executive worked together to create a funding plan for MCPS, and the executive did send over a budget adjustment. That adjustment increased local funding for MCPS in FY20 by $5.1 million over his March recommendation. And this was due to the county anticipating additional state funding for 911 emergency telephone systems, which then frees up $5.1 million that can be allocated to MCPS. The other component of the executive's budget adjustment was the additional state aid from the Kerwin Commission legislation. And so the total recommended state aid is an increase of about $52 million over the FY19 levels. $27.6 million of that is from the normal state aid formula changes that happen each year, and so those were a net positive for us this year. And then the $24.4 million from the Kerwin legislation. As Councilmember Rice mentioned, MCPS went through the Kerwin legislation and looked at the different funding requirements associated with each piece of those new dollars. And so based on that, they plan to utilize about $10.4 million to fund services or program enhancements that were already included in the board's request, and about $14 million to expand funding in specific areas that was detailed in the legislation. You talked earlier today in the joint HHS session during Education Culture HHS session about the pre-K dollars, and so the committee did recommend moving that $1 million from the NDA to the MCPS budget, and one of the reasons for that is so the Up-County Center that MCPS plans to open can open on time and not be delayed until January. In terms of programmatic adjustments, the committee did spend a great deal of time talking about programmatic adjustments. There's about $19.6 million in additional funding in the board's request for strategic priority accelerators. Some of these include elementary school class size reductions, extended school year programming at Arcola and Roscoe Nix Elementaries, expanding dual enrollment and middle college programs, which we also talked about with Montgomery College just a minute ago. MCPS is assuming administration of the Summer Rise program. They also added counselor and psychologist positions, both based on enrollment and also to enhance services. They added assistant principal positions to several elementary schools that currently do not have an assistant principal. The increased language exposure at elementary schools, and also strengthened and improved background checks of school staff. So I'll stop there to see if there are any questions on those issues before I do have some technical adjustments to the non-tax supported funds that I need to go through.
I don't see any lights, so you think you can proceed
Okay.
with the technical adjustments.
Sounds good. So since the committee's last meeting, MCPS did get some finalized grant award data. So as a result, they're requesting a net increase in the FY20 non-tax supported grant funds of $2,423,226. This results from including the federal Title IV grant as a budgeted grant. In prior years, we did this as a supplemental and did it when the appropriation was received, but they know they're going the dollar amount that they're going to receive this year, so we can include it as a budgeted grant. There's a decrease in the federal Title III grant award of $285,000. And then increases in the Individuals with Disabilities Education Grant and the Perkins Career and Technical Education Grant of $458,000 and $181,000. There's also one more change that I did not include in here, but it doesn't affect the total dollar amount, but there is a shift between federal and state grant amounts of $15,221 for the Infants and Toddlers grant, and this is just a shift within the grants fund of whether it's listed as a state aid or federal aid. So in total, if the council supports these recommended technical adjustments, it would increases MCPS's total FY20 appropriation to $2,680,506,935, but does not affect tax-supported appropriations.
So would we need to make a motion on those technical adjustments, Mr. Howard?
Yes.
Okay, so I'd like to go ahead and put that before the committee and ask for a motion.
Been moved and seconded by Councilmember Reamer, seconded by Councilmember Jawando. Are there any objections to this technical adjustments? No objections.
And so that leaves our full budget before us. I would just like to highlight again and just pull out a couple of the ones that are incredibly important when we're expanding and talking about now year-round programs at schools that are highly impacted. These are the kinds of things that we know based on research and data that's out there that make a difference when it comes to the achievement of our students. And so these are things that the school system is doing to directly address the opportunity equity achievement gap. Just one example, reducing elementary school class size. We know again, and especially when it's targeted to some of our highly impacted schools, will make a difference in our opportunity equity achievement gap. We are doing the work. And I say we because we're in partnership in making these things happen. We support these kinds of initiatives, and I know we need to do more. We've heard from many of my colleagues who have talked about how we need to add more counselors and psychologists. We look forward to working with the school system to continue to beef those up. We know about the mental health challenges. It's Mental Health Awareness Month, and so it's a great opportunity to talk about while we are expanding, we're not expanding enough, and we know that, but we need more resources to do it. And so I look forward to working with the county executive and making sure that he understands why this is imperative, why this is important, and hopefully together we can come back next year with a budget that more accurately reflects the needs that we see within our Montgomery County Public Schools. So with that, Madam President, we have the MCPS budget before us.
Thank you so much. Councilmember Feetson.
Thank you, Council President, for your leadership on this as well, and really bringing everybody together to solve what was, the fatally flawed budget that we started with, which didn't fully fund schools. And so I really appreciate your leadership and getting that sorted out. And to Councilmember Rice, having you doing the work that you've been doing with the Kerwin Commission, and then coming back here and bringing that expertise, not only pushing for the funding at the state level, but making sure that it is properly reflected at the local level, which is, the single most important partnership that we have, is figuring out how state and local funding can be combined to serve the needs of our students, which is the single most indispensable social and economic resource we have, our public education system. And I just really appreciate that. And thank you to Superintendent for your leadership, and to the board president as well. Both of you, I think, are just tremendous reflections of humble leadership, of not having egos, of just going about your work, and really being partners and looking to put the work before yourselves. And I really do appreciate that. I will share the comments made by Councilmember Rice that the system isn't perfect. It's a really good school system. We're fortunate to have it. It's the reason why it's such a desirable place to live here in Montgomery County, but there certainly are lots and lots of challenges. A school system with 163,000 students in it is bound to have problems with students, problems with teachers, problems with administrators, and problems with parents, and problems with everywhere in between. And that isn't an easy job. It comes with a lot of difficult decisions that you have to make, but I appreciate the way that you approach the work, and not just the work itself. And we have Pat O'Neill here, who, for me as a new elected official who is doing my best to represent a very demanding area of the county, which is a good thing. Pat has just been a tremendous asset to me, and really understanding the community, learning about the history of issues as somebody who's just been around them for so long, and I'm just very grateful for that. And I'll just say that as a product of Montgomery County Public Schools, the son of a Montgomery County Public School teacher, the child of parents who both attended Montgomery County Public Schools, I wouldn't be here if not for the great school system that we have. And I am so fortunate to have the teachers that I've had, and to continue to have relationships with a lot of those teachers. And with all of that said, and the thank yous for all of the hard work, to the point that Councilmember Rice was making about long-term funding and talking about Kerwin, and part of that conversation, I've heard a lot of comments made about whether or not we'd be in a position to be able to fund the expectations that we're going to have to put in the county money to get the state money in order to solve these critical needs that we have. And I've been really disappointed in some of the comments that have been made about whether or not we would be able or willing or committed to doing that. And I just wanted to make sure that I added my voice to Councilmember Rice as chair of the Education and Culture Committee, who's been very consistent about it. We have to. And any comments to the contrary, that we are not going to come together to figure this out and to make sure that we have sustainable and fiscally responsible budgets this year, mostly so that we can ensure that we can provide the investments in future years, particularly to education, is and should be a non-starter for all of us up here. And so I just wanted to add my voice to that, express my disappointment with some of those comments that have been made, and to just make sure that I emphatically say that if we aren't committed to ensuring that we are budgeting today for the investments that we need to make tomorrow, then we are not doing this right. and we are not doing right by our residents and our citizens who elected us to be here, and that we need to come together and to commit to do it, because if we don't, the future will not be nearly as bright as the past. And it can be, and it should be, and if we commit to it, it will be.
Thank you. So, well, I can only say that, I understood very clearly, having done this before as council president, that this part of the budget process, it's truly one of the most critical components of our work as a council. And so, it was truly just a privilege to work with the Board of Education under the leadership of Ms. Evans and Ms. Pat O'Neill, you Superintendent Smith, and your staff, along with my colleagues and the executive, to say we can't make this some big, dramatic thing. We need to come together, solve the issue, and really move on, because we don't have time to really waste creating these false dramas when we know that there's a lot at stake. I want to also acknowledge and thank the rest of MCPS staff that is here, very also involved and willing to partner with us in other areas of the budget. I mean, we're not just investing in this piece, in terms of the operating budget, but we're also looking at innovative ways that we can leverage our resources and our capacity in other areas. So whether it's after school activities, or whether, we're talking about mentoring programs, or we're talking about the summer slide, whatever it is, this is a county that is constantly looking to identify whatever it is we can do, whatever opportunities we might be able to leverage to further this issue of academic achievement and to be a model nationally. Of course, early care and education is huge, and it's going to make a big difference. And I'm really excited about these incredible major steps that we're taking forward, because just like Ms. O'Neill, been around the block for a little while and know that many of these kinds of proposals are such that we have identified for many years. It's just kind of everybody coming together, and as somebody said, putting egos aside and saying we got to get this, going, because it is so connected to everything we do. Economic development, la-di-da, it's just all over the place. And I will also say, as a parent of somebody who, a child that went through White Oak Middle School, Springbrook, and is gainfully employed and very happy, and another one that went through Rock Creek Forest, Westland, and BCC, and is just graduated and will be gainfully employed very soon, already has an offer letter, which is great. All schools in Montgomery County are great schools. They really are. We need to understand that, and we need to also be clear that where we have those challenges, that we're not going to shy away from addressing them, head on. So I am very, very, very excited about this extraordinary team, my colleagues, the leadership at MCPS, the Board of Education, everybody that is always looking for those extraordinary innovative ways, whether it's the Kit Museum in terms of expanding, access to STEM. I mean, there's just so many great things that that is just really thrilling. So thank you so much for all that work. And Councilmember Rice, thank you for just really, truly dedicating yourself completely in so many ways to, have a positive impact on every aspect of education. It is so important, and it speaks volume for who we are in this county. So with that, we have Montgomery County Public Schools operating budget recommendation from the Education Culture Committee, and Councilmember Jawanda also has been an amazing leader in this committee as well. All those in favor, raise your hand. It's unanimous. Thank you so much. All right, and we're not done, because we also have CIP.
Once again.
For that, we have Councilmember Rice.
Thank you very much, Madam President. I'll take it away again. With our CIP budget, let me just say that, again, there's much more need than we have money for. The Board of Education request included about $47.6 million in additional expenditures in the FY19 through 24, our 6-year CIP. That would mean that the total MCPS CIP would go up about 2.7%, or $1.826 billion from the approved $1.78 billion as recommended before. The county executive recommended about $1.76 billion for the amended CIP with technical amendments about moving 11.9 from FY19 to 18. There was an affordability reconciliation placeholder project that was put in for Board of Education proposed expenditures in the amount of about $51.1 million. Also had some substantial funding switches in there as well. We, of course, then, when we have disconnect between where the school board is and the affordability that the county executives put forth, has asked MCPS to always come back to us with non-recommended reductions that would bring us closer to what the county executive had recommended. And so MCPS provided that total package that amounted to about $51.3 million, all bond-funded reductions. And so as a committee, we voted unanimously to approve the county executive's recommended technical adjustments. Those are listed on page 5. We approved the county executive's recommended funding switches and the MCPS funding reconciliation project pending final reconciliation. So we'll be working with Dr. Orland on that, but really want to thank Mr. Levchenko and Mr. Howard for working with us to get us there. We did add one new solution project, which is the Francis Scott Key Middle School solution, and we removed 2 other solution projects, both the Einstein High School Cluster Project and the Judith B. Resnick Elementary School Solution Project, and that was based on a review of the SSP, that the test that was done back in March. We also approved the Board of Education's proposed CIP amendments, except for those that were, of course, affected by the non-recommended reductions. And that, of course, again, is pending final reconciliation with Dr. Orland. We zeroed out the executive's affordability reconciliation placeholder project, and that adds back the $750,000 in the FY20 current revenue. And we'll need to address that, of course, at reconciliation as well. We also approved the Seneca Valley High School Special Appropriation Amendment, and again, that was to make sure that we had the ability to move forward with the second expansion of Edison, the CTE program at Seneca Valley High School, and then we assumed the Board of Education's latest revised project schedules for the Woodward High School reopening and Northwood High School addition and facility upgrades project. And so with that, I want to turn to staff to make sure that I haven't missed anything, but did just want to say that one of the things we also talked about in our Education and Culture Committee is about the new enrollment projections as well as methodology associated with that, and we look forward to getting more of an update when the system has a little bit more information as it goes through another iteration in a few months. This will be something that the community has expressed some angst and concern over. Obviously, as we go to a new system of which we do projections, we want to make sure that folks have the ability to understand how the calculations are made. But, certainly just want to appreciate the openness in having these discussions about the process, and for us to have the ability to ask questions of the consultant, to hear directly from them about how it is that they're structuring this and how they're going to be utilizing new data and incorporating that in terms of their continued projections is incredibly important. And then, of course, just again, wanted to highlight the state aid piece at the $59.2 million for FY20, but understand that we may be looking at some additional funding that will be coming in from the state once we get those final allocations, which I think will be in a couple of weeks, Mr. Levchenko?
Well, it is a bit confusing. Last week, the Interagency Commission on School Construction made its approved the 100% of what was under its control, and that for that the county, Montgomery County, got $57.2 million, a little bit less than what you see here. But as you mentioned, there's a significant amount of dollars out there still that has not been allocated yet, that is going through a process that we have not gone through before. So we are somewhat in limbo with that, and that is complicating the issue this year. And when those dollars do come in, that may present us with the ability to add some resources in FY20, but we're hesitant to do that now because we don't know what those numbers are.
Right, so just for my colleagues, typically we've achieved a certain percentage of whatever that leftover pie is, and it would result in significant amount for us. Typically, if we use the projections of percentages, I think it would amount to somewhere in the neighborhood of 16 to 20 million additional. Is that not?
I've certainly heard those numbers.
Right.
I
Okay.
can't speak to how accurate that'll be this time around,
Right.
but we're certainly hopeful that we're going to see significantly more come our way if this process plays out the way we hope it does.
Excellent, excellent. So that is a synopsis of where our CIP is, but wanted to turn it over to staff and just see if I missed anything. If not, yay.
I think you hit the main points well. There's a lot of detail in the packet that we can go over to whatever council members want to do. Also, as you alluded to earlier, there were some subdivision staging policy issues that the committee went over, and there would be some clusters in school areas going into moratorium under these recommendations that are also noted in the committee packets that are attached to this cover sheet. So we can certainly refresh council members on that as well if they're interested. But I think you covered the salient points with the Education Committee recommendations.
Excellent. Let me just say that regarding our moratorium as a whole and our subdivision staging policy, I know, Madam President, we're going to be having a discussion about that in greater detail, which I think would be the appropriate time for us to really talk about our school moratorium issues as a whole. And so from that perspective, I'd probably like to, just leave that off the table for right now. I think that, again, in working with our school system and being able to balance between the needs and understanding that, when it comes to the affordability of this county, it still requires us to build additional, and while there may be debates about that, I think that it's clear that folks still want to live here in Montgomery County. And so we do want to continue to provide opportunities for folks to want to live here in Montgomery County to do so, but at the same time, we have to address the overcrowding issues that we see within our schools and make sure that we're not impinging on the school system's ability to be able to provide a quality education to our students that's not hindered by overcapacity. And so from that perspective, I look forward to us having a continued conversation about how we can work together to ensure that both of those parallel tracks move forward that are incredibly important for our community. So I'll just leave it with that and turn it over to you, Madam President.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Councilmember Joando.
Thank you, Council President. Thank you, Mr. Rice. I just wanted to say ditto to the first conversation. I didn't want to get us out of here, so I didn't want to say too much. But just very appreciative of all the work and the deliberation and the focus that you've brought to the issues while lifting up the school at the same time. I think it's very important to strike the balance of we've got a great system, but we know we have some challenges and some needs. And your budget was focused on that. I love the strategic priorities and the way the board is laser focused in that. So thank you, Ms. Evans, and to the entire school board. I also just wanted to say on the CIP, we were very excited to support the safety improvements, but obviously also the Seneca Valley Career and Technical Education name to be changed. I know, but the exciting career-focused and technology-focused center that will mirror Edison up county, that's so connected to what we're trying to do and create career pathways and work-based learning opportunities for our students. So really excited, and I think the public needs to know that that's a big deal for us here. And so we're addressing needs in addition to the crowding, and it's good to know that I had a great session with you all with your projections on the school capacity, and I know we're going to be entering lower numbers now, but that we're preparing for that and we're updating our methodology, which can never be perfect, but that we're doing continuous improvement. So I just want to thank you for all those things that are relevant to here in the CIP, but to the overall work, and look forward to working with you all in the years to come. So thank you for being here.
Okay, so without, I don't see any other lights. So with that, all those in favor of adopting the CIP for Montgomery County Public Schools, please raise your hand. And that is unanimous. Thank you so much. Thank you. Great. So now on to item 8, and this is our last item of the day. We have the cost sharing, Montgomery County Government, State Match Community Grants, and Arts Capital Grants for current replacement modernizations. Education and culture.
Y'all thought I was joking. I know Sydney's getting tired of hearing me talk. You heard me talk all weekend, Sydney, so I know this is at an end. I know. So let me just start off by saying that what a great opportunity it is for us to, and I have to, again, this is going to be the accolades to the council president in terms of her restructuring of our committees. But having education and culture really is something that has worked tremendously well. It's given our arts community a chance to be highlighted and lifted up because health and human services is such a big portion of what we do. And so it gives our arts a chance to kind of shine on its own. And there are a number of our arts and humanities organizations that are applying for some of our community grants and also through our Arts and Humanities Council, Montgomery County. But I know there's going to be a joint work session to talk about some of these issues moving forward with my good friend, the chair of the Health and Human Services Committee and the Government Operations Committee, to really talk about how we want to continue seeing this move forward. But today, what we're going to do is just talk about the county executive's proposal and his cost sharing. He recommended 15 capital and 2 arts community grants projects that total about $1.33 million. They've supported the Arts and Humanities Council recommendations as well as 4 arts capital projects for approval. They total about $253,000, and then recommended shifting about $220,000 from the cost sharing to the PLAR for the renovations to Black Rock Center for the Arts. And so let me thank both Ms. Chen and Ms. Price, but I will turn it over to Ms. Price to just kind of walk us through, but I think it's pretty straightforward.
Thank you. So the executive had recommended a number of cost-sharing grants in FY20. They're separated by arts and also community grants. The Education and Culture Committee had recommended approval as submitted for all the projects for arts and community grants. Like you said, there were 4 for the art side that totaled about $250,000, and then the remainder are for the community grant side. Included, there are 2 grants for Olney and Roundhouse Theater, which are arts organizations, but their award is under community grants, and those total $500,000.
And so, Madam President, that is what's before us. I know that we have received a couple of memos related to our cost sharing, and so I know some people may have their lights on. I'm actually a partner to one of those memos, but I'll let, since I am the chair and I don't like to make my own motions, I'll let folks speak to them directly.
Councilmember Reamer.
Great, thank you. Well, I was the only one probably not on a memo, but I'm going to make up for that in real time. If my colleagues will turn to page 6 of the packet, I think we're going to have requests for most of the groups on the cost-sharing items. But there's one I wanted to make sure was not left behind, and that's the Menard Foundation. And they requested $19,000 to complete the restoration of an historic barn. And Councilmember Craig Rice and I attended a ceremony. There was a certificate provided by the state at the Button Farm, and we had a chance to kind of walk around with a group of community and state leaders and take a look at the incredible historic resource there that they're trying very hard to restore, and they're able to provide private fundraising, and they have funding from the state as well. But the county's share that they've asked for, the executive did got part of the way there, 10,000 of the 19,000 requested, but I would think that, I would hope the council would want to fully fund that request so that that historic barn can be restored, and so that the foundation can become a bigger and bigger attraction. I think what's amazing about Menard is just the programs that the organization provides, the historic and cultural tourism, and this county's own story, and how much work Tony Cohen is able to do in pulling out our story and presenting it to the community and to the world. So this barn is part of a bigger picture about historical interpretation in Montgomery County. And for $9,000, I think we can get a lot done here. So I'd like to make a motion that we add to the reconciliation list $9,000 in the cost-sharing category for this project. Second. Thank you. Seconded by Councilmember Katz.
All right, so this has been moved by Councilmember Reamer and seconded by Councilmember Katz. This is on page 6, and that's number 13, the Menard Foundation. Is there any objection to that particular proposal? Nope. Okay, without objection, that will go on the reconciliation list. Councilmember Katz.
Thank you very much. And you have received, as Councilmember Reamer mentioned, you have received a memorandum from myself, as well as Councilmember Rice, Councilmember Albornoz, Councilmember Hucker, Councilmember Friedson, to talk about, and Reamer, you can jump in this thing. I mean, there's a chance that, yeah, okay, all right. I'm getting punch drunk here. That we respectfully request that we have $175,000 placed on the reconciliation list. $50,000 is for the Ivy Mount School request, $50,000 for safe learning environment. $50,000 is for the Charles E. Smith Jewish Day School of Greater Washington's request for security enhancements for their lower school campus, and $75,000 is on the reconciliation list for the Manna Food Center so that they can make improvements to their distribution hub. Even though all three are different, all three certainly save lives. Ivy Mount certainly is a non-public special education facility. It's both of our students from Montgomery County go there, as well as students from other areas. And of course, they need these funds for security upgrades, which is interesting that if you look into the memo itself, that they're not eligible for security upgrades for funding under the Maryland Safe to Learn Act of 2018. And that in itself should be changed by the state of Maryland, incidentally, as is the same situation for the Charles E. Smith Day School. They're not eligible as well. And as far as Manna Food Center, they're seeking the $100,000 in capital funding currently on for several small but critical retrofitting projects at their Gaithersburg warehouse. And then they're installing scales and new food racks, and they got a state bond bill for $150,000, as the others got state bond bills too, for $150,000. But we need this for the gap of $75,000. So with that, that is their recommendation, and if you like, I would so move that we do that.
Second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. It's been moved by Vice President Katz and seconded by Councilmember Friedson. Is there any discussion, any objection to this memo that has already 5 council members on it? All right, without objection, we will place these on the reconciliation list. Councilmember Friedson.
Well, Madam President, if this doesn't demonstrate the fact that this is a county council that works together in collaboration and builds consensus, a memo from more than it is two, in order to get something on the reconciliation list is an indication of how well we work together in our shared goal. But similarly to this, and I have 2 more to last-minute adds on the reconciliation list, but certainly not least here, along with Councilmember Albornoz as the HHS chair, 2 organizations as part of the cost sharing that are really serving some of the most vulnerable residents in our community. JFGH, the Jewish Foundation for Group Homes, and PCR, Potomac Community Resources. The $50,000 for JFGH This is specifically to help our residents with emotional cognitive differences to age in place as part of our goal. All people, all of our residents, all Montgomery County residents should have the opportunity to age with dignity and vitality and independence, and this is an effort to help to do that. And then similarly with Potomac Community Resources, this would allow for ADA compliant ability for one of the facilities that PCR has to serve residents. Again, two organizations that are serving some of the most vulnerable in our community, recognizing that we have limited resources. But in terms of the conversation we had earlier about partnering with our nonprofits to squeeze a little bit more and to get significant benefits to serve those we need, I think these are a recommendation in order to do that. And so I'd be pleased to move to add those two amounts, $50,000 to JFGH and $25,000 to PCR to the reconciliation list.
And I'll second that.
All right, so that's moved by Councilmember Friedson and seconded by Councilmember Katz. I do have a light. Councilmember Albornoz, did you want to?
Just to underscore, I do have one additional item to mention at the very end, but while we're on this specific item, just want to acknowledge the really great work of both organizations, but in particular PCR, that it's an organization I've become very familiar with, and there's very little infrastructure in place to provide respite opportunities for our developmentally disabled families, particularly those with adult children. And so this is a great initiative and program, and I'm proud to support it.
Thank you. All right, so let's see, without objection, we'll place those on the reconciliation list. All right, Councilmember Albornoz.
Thank you. Connecting two dots, we had a discussion just before on how challenging it and overwhelming is to process all the stuff with regards to the budget, but I didn't want to miss the opportunity to highlight one last item for my colleagues. We're fortunate to have an incredible organization in our community that's Casa de Maryland that does really fantastic work. We received a recent update on the newly arriving immigrants that we are anticipating and currently seeing in very large numbers, both in with our unaccompanied minors and now young families that we're seeing come across the border. There is great interest in racial equity within this council, and there's also great interest in expanding efforts to ensure that we are not just a welcoming community, but that we provide very strong transitional services for our newly arriving communities. And so it was very recently brought to my attention that the capital improvement programs for the Walkville Welcome Center were only recommended at $50,000, but the request was $250,000. I'd like to move that we put on the reconciliation list the entire $250,000 amount, or the additional $200,000 to make it a complete $250,000 amount from the capital requests that are also on page number 5 in your packet.
Okay, it's been moved by Councilmember Albornoz. It's been seconded by Councilmember Hucker. Are there any objections to placing the $200,000 for the Casa Welcome Center? All right, so that will go on the reconciliation list. All right, anything else, Ms. Price?
No, I will just say, totaling all these amounts, we're adding $459,000 to the rec list for these projects.
Wonderful. All right, well, I don't see any other lights. And before somebody else hits any other ideas, I think that before it gets more expensive, I think that, just kidding. I think that we are adjourned. Thank you so much.